Welcome to Prime Time on Money FM 89.3. It's Friday, the 18th of February, and we've got a very special show lined up for you today. Of course, today is the Singapore Budget Day. What have we got happening today, JP?
Well, from 3:15 p.m., we'll be giving you a recap to look for in the budget. This is also the first budget statement for Lawrence Wong that Lawrence Wong will be delivering as Finance Minister. It is expected to include measures to put Singapore on a surer footing for the post-pandemic future.
And before we take the budget speech live at 3:30, we're going to bring you live commentary from our panelists during the budget speech. We've got in the studio with us today Alvin Liew, Senior Economist at UOB, and Chiu, who's a partner at Head of Enterprise Tax at KPMG Singapore. Thank you both so much for joining us on the show today. Great to have you both in the studio with us today. Now, the theme of this year's budget is charting our new way forward together, and it aims to give Singaporeans confidence to embrace the journey forward. And apart from laying out the government's plans to take Singapore forward, this year's budget is also likely to also include continued support for sectors that are finding it difficult as we go through, continue to tackle COVID-19, sectors such as perhaps aviation, tourism, possibly even construction as well. What else are we going to be looking out for, JP?
Well, I think a lot of we're going to be looking out for also today is that this budget might be very different from the pandemic budget we saw over the last few years. A lot has really been spent. Some say that everything, including the kitchen sink, was really thrown at the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And now is the time to look forward, as the budget has said. But how do we make that transition moving forward? Is Singapore actually ready to take off some of the trading moves we've actually put on? And will we actually be ready to actually try and replenish the coffers that are needed to make sure we're back on the same track? I mean, there's a lot of nuances here, and as we know, with a lot of these things, it's easier said than done. A lot of tricky things along the way as well, and we'll be leaning on the folks at UOB and KPMG to help us understand some of these intricacies.
That's right, as the budget goes live at 3:30. But before we get there, I want to ask both of you, what are your thoughts on this year's theme for the budget, charting our new way forward together? Alvin?
Well, I think it's a nice change. After, if we thought that we go through 2 years, but if you look at 2020, we literally had 5 budgets during that year because of the nature of the pandemic itself. So now we are seeing a refocusing on the medium, longer term objectives of the country. I think, and of course, not forgetting that we are still in a pandemic, but the short-term measures, I would assume that there will still be quite a few. But the bulk of the focus, I would expect to see will be all on the longer term issues, be it on the healthcare related, the demographic, the aging population, the way to move forward a country in a digitalized world.
And how does this fit in with KPMG's wish list? You spoke about an economic sunrise. So how does the theme of this year's budget perhaps fit in with that?
Yeah, okay. I think this year budget not only look at the structural, the economy, and also but more towards what's going ahead in terms of sustainability, in terms of green initiatives, in terms of carbon taxes, in terms of what Singapore can place itself in the world map in terms of advancing as a nation. So it's not about recovering the economy. It's about how to take the country a step forward in the that right direction. Yeah.
Now, we've seen, as mentioned a while ago, an unprecedented number of budgets over the past 2 years. And again, a lot of these emergency measures really to try and make up and perhaps cushion the economy and everyday Singaporeans from the impact of COVID-19, really, the economic impacts, really. And because of that, there is a sense that maybe there is lost ground that needs to be covered at the moment. Is this budget going to be under pressure, perhaps, to try and achieve or even overachieve because of this?
Yeah, but probably it's different from previous 2 budgets where a lot of transfers have been made to fill up the coffer. Now it's probably a budget that see how we can fill up the coffer in the form of raise more taxes to be levied. So at the top of everybody's mind will be GST. Whether the 2% will be increased in one go or staggered, and then how about wealth taxes? How about carbon taxes? And whether the tax base should be broadened to capture more levels for taxing.
And that said, that is the big question, isn't it? GST and what's
Yes.
going to happen. What do you think, Alvin? Are we likely to see it staggered? Are we going to see it all in one blow? Is it going to be this July? Is it going to be next year? So many questions. What can we look for?
We from UOB, we expect it to be one time. Administratively, it will be easier because if you have to stagger it over 2 years on that percentage itself, right? There is administrative costs and time waste. But of course, on the flip side, right, we do see that there are people that are still very much affected in this pandemic, and this will add on to costs. And I think we can expect there will be some measures announced in there, right, to help cushion the lower income, and the vulnerable and the older on this impact itself. And we do see that there is a good chance that it will be implemented this year, as early as July.
But hopefully some measures to buffer the blow. What do you think, Wong?
Definitely.
Yes, I mean, the government has already committed a $6 billion assurance package. Question is this package enough? Would there be more? And then the permanent GST voucher and the USAVE rebates, utilities, subsidies are always there. So to make this increase in GST rate hike not so regressive, but at least on a more progressive way, because GST in fact affects the low income families more than the middle income or the high income family. So with all these subsidies, it's also a very important feature which Singapore has designed in our GST system, which is very different from the rest of countries.
In fact, when you talk about the different impact of taxes on different classes in the social strata, right, it has been also whispered and talked about that potentially there could also be talk of a potential wealth tax also that might be on the cards. Now, we have to wait for the budget to actually come out before we actually do it. I don't want to put words in the mouths of the ministers of Singapore, but generally, what does this mean for Singapore if we do start to see a wealth tax actually introduced? What kind of implications?
Possible fiscal opportunities that a wealth tax introduced to Singapore might actually entail for
And
both of you.
what might it look like, especially since there are a lot of
Of course, yes.
analysts looking at it perhaps impacting the property market for one?
Wealth tax is not new, not just in Singapore, or in fact, with all these big government spending all over the world, their coffers are being dried up. So everybody's looking at how to increase the taxes through wealth tax. So wealth tax is already actually in existence in Singapore. Whatever form it takes, could be an increase in property tax, stamp duty, and in fact, motor vehicle ARF is also a wealth tax. So question is, do we want to have more taxes on luxury items, on property? If you look at wealth tax, it has to be designed in a very calibrated, useful way. If not, there will be a flight of wealthy people from wanting to come to Singapore. It can be counterproductive, right? So if you design properly and it's fair, I think it may achieve the result. But more importantly, it's a signal to the country that the government is addressing a wealth inequality. I mean, income inequality, we have many ways to achieve it or address it. But in terms of wealth, it becomes more disparate, apparent if you don't do something about it.
And could this actually go some ways in also helping Singapore's goals of trying to restore the fiscal position and maybe even replenish the coffers? What do you think, Alvin?
Yes, definitely. If this is another source, depending on, again, like what Wong has described, right, how it's being designed, right, it can help to improve the situation, the fiscal situation. But we also have to come back to why the first target of the approach is at GST. GST is broad-based, fairly stable, and if you look at the in terms of the numbers itself, it's the fourth largest single item, other than the income taxes, the corporate taxes, as well as transfers. I know NRIC, I think. Yeah. So that itself makes it attractive. But I think the approach of the wealth tax, while it also helps the coffer itself, it addresses the issues that what Wong has said about the wealth inequality, and to make it and I think in a way it also improves the social cohesion of the nation itself. It has those benefits. So, but we have to weigh it against how it will impact, if it has to be designed well. If not, it will impact our status as a wealth hub. for the region or for Asia itself.
And we're going to find out more. The budget speech will start in just under 5 minutes. But since we're talking taxes, we've got to talk about sustainability as well, because that's one of the big themes for
Indeed.
this year's budget. We've got to start off by talking about the carbon tax. We know that some form of announcement possibly is going to be coming out of the speech later on today. What might we expect? There have been numerous articles about Singapore, the size of Singapore's carbon tax in comparison to other international markets. What kind of shift could we possibly see when it comes to carbon tax here in Singapore, Alvin?
First off, right, because if you compare across a lot of the countries that have such a carbon tax, right, ours at $5 is really on the low side. So the only way this carbon tax will move is only higher.
And let's put that in context. I mean, how high is it in other countries?
Okay, if you look at of course, the Europeans are leading the way in the carbon this segment. And if you look at carbon tax, Singapore is $5, right? I think equivalent in Sing dollars itself in UK, France, right? They're closer to $140. So there is a huge gap. Of course, these two countries are right at the tip of the extreme. But countries like maybe comparative to, like, let's say the US is about $23 Sing dollars.
So $23, under $30, but this is every ton of carbon emission?
Correct.
That's
Correct. Okay.
Wu Hong, what might that mean for businesses?
Yeah,
An increasing carbon
that
tax.
means
Especially
that
for SMEs as well.
Yeah, I think the cost will be passed down to the business. That's for sure. If the rate is suddenly increased by so much in such a short time, which is not advisable or not good. So a gradual increase will be most likely, I think. And then, but I think we also have to take a more like a carrot approach to incentivize companies to adopt alternative solution. Taxation alone will not change the behavior totally or reduce emission. So maybe in the terms of grants, double tax incentives for companies who turn into use green initiative, adopt green equipment, appliances and technology. So maybe the government should find ways to finance all these activities, all these projects, infrastructure projects to make Singapore more green.
I mean, some believe that maybe the carbon tax can also be used as an opportunity to help finance some of these carrot initiatives that you talked about, Wu Hong, as well.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what else might we look out for on the sustainability front? Just rewinding, Wu Hong, to the KPMG wish list. I know that you were looking for a fund as well. Sorry, let me just bring up my notes here. KPMG had called for the government to advance Singapore's green agenda by setting up a $1 billion fund to drive green innovations. I mean, how feasible do you think something like this might be, given that we are still in that post-pandemic world where we're possibly going to see some measures to tackle the immediate, but then, it's also the medium to long term?
This is our wish list, and we want Singapore to be the ESG leader in this region. And I think this is the amount may looks big, but I don't think it's not possible. With borrowings, I mean, the government has mentioned in the previous budget they are open to borrowing, issuing bonds, obtain bank financing to undertake all these big projects. So this is something I think with proper planning and with government helps and credibility, this is something that I think Singapore can embark on a journey with the right partners.
Right. In fact, when you look at Singapore, despite the fact that they spent so much of the fiscal reserves on supporting us with the pandemic, Singapore is still in a pretty good state. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Alvin. I think in the AAA club of sovereign bonds, Singapore is still at the top or near the top, actually. So in terms of credit quality, the space is actually there. But the question is, what might behoove the government perhaps taking on more borrowings to finance any of these ambitious projects that Wu Hong was talking about?
I think to take a more pragmatic step, I think there's urgency in the matter. Climate change is real and there's something that they need to tackle. But at the same time, you need to also be prudent that you cannot be jumping into every single project. We simply do not have the account resources, even though you can say that this is all borrowings, taking from borrowing. So I think there must be some targeted approach, which I think the government has put in effort to study. I think in previous budgets itself, there has been already the longer term, I would say, projects in mind that they have lined up. Certainly, we are moving in the correct direction, but I don't think that they will want to be in a state where they push in all fronts. Rather, I think there's more targeted approach.
And beyond sustainability now, let's talk about corporates. Yesterday, we had one of your colleagues on the show, Wuhong, and we were talking about the international corporate tax rate. What might we see here in Singapore, and what does that mean for Singapore's competitiveness?
Yeah, I think the latest tax development globally is about this minimum tax rate, right? And if this minimum tax rate of 15%, so if this will come into play in 2023, then and what does it mean for Singapore, whereby we have tax incentives that incentivize company to come to do business here? So I think the government will probably shed some light on this in this year budget, how they plan to do this, and to make Singapore continue to be attractive to investors that are entrenched here. So, but I think tax is not the only tools that make Singapore attractive. I mean, the infrastructure, the talent that we have here, the resources that we have here are soft factors that equally make Singapore very attractive. Yeah.
Not to mention also the fact that people also talk about the legal system. When you look at all
That's
these
right.
contracts for international corporations, a lot of them do cite if there is a dispute to resolve it either in the Hong Kong or a Singapore court of law, right? So there are a lot of other factors actually there. But could we expect any other possible sweeteners for corporations, or does the government have the space to do that?
Well, I think filling up to raise revenue is probably one of the top agenda. Sweetener, I don't think there will be a lot for corporates, but the usual things like giving grants to company, to certain sectors, more targeted to enable our SME to build capabilities, skills retraining, expanding overseas, will be those support, targeted support that government will probably continue to roll out, right? And of course, enhanced donation deduction for companies to donate to help the poorer families. The charity front, I think there will be probably encourage more charity to help the Singapore population.
And if I may just add, I think corporates right now, the big corporates, a lot of their considerations now are just beyond also the bottom line, because they also put ESG as one of the key focus of how they do business. And if the country, Singapore, does reflect well in this area and shows our commitment in these areas, right, it does attract also corporates to come here. I think at the end of the day, it has gone beyond just the bottom line.
You're listening to Primetime on Money FM 89.3. We're joined in the studio today by Chiu Hong, partner head of enterprise tax at KPMG Singapore, and Alvin Liew, senior economist at UOB. We have a very special budget program for you today. We're just waiting for Finance Minister Lawrence Wong to begin his speech, which should be any minute now. Time on the clock is 3:33 this Friday, the 18th of February. So that said, we've spoken about corporate tax, we've spoken about carbon tax, we've spoken about GST. What other goodies are you looking out for, Alvin?
Well, I think in the last 2 years, there have been absence of like top-ups for various schemes because of due to the pandemic. It was really needing to throw in the sink to really save the economy and maintain keep the individuals afloat. And right now, while we are still in the pandemic itself, but I think there's a case to see some of these top-ups to return, and that's probably one of the things that will happen. And of course, I think there are the undeniable facts that there are areas that continue to be key towards the country in terms of nation building, education, and of course we have very low birth rates. We need to again tackle those issues. If not, a budget cannot change fertility, but it certainly can help.
Do you think, though, are we likely to see any incentives when it comes to that particular
area? That's a very
area?
good question, actually.
I mean, present self
yes,
excluded.
You as an expectant mom, I think you should look. I would hope that there will be more on that area. Definitely. Like I said, a budget won't change the fertility numbers in overnight, but I think it will certainly help to go a long way to start to improve the situation, hopefully through consistent efforts to promote family, I guess.
I want to bring up something that Wu Hong alluded to a while ago, and that's about upskilling the workforce of Singapore. And if there's something we've learned from the pandemic, is that any shifts and any trends towards how industries are evolving have really been accelerated. Digitization, we've seen the adoption of AI, for instance, automation, and all of these things. And I think it's pressing now that even now Singapore's budget actually invests more to making sure that the workforce of Singapore can meet the needs of the future. I do want to ask you, Alvin, in previous budgets, have efforts to actually spend and actually support some of these upskillings, have they actually made a difference in making sure that Singapore's workforce can actually adapt for the needs of the future? Have we actually seen that this has borne fruit, and can they actually continue that if that's the case?
I think a lot of these measures have positive impact.
Okay.
But I just like to move ourselves back to one of the surveys that the bank has done ahead of this budget, right? And some of the key findings that in the survey is fairly interesting, because we were looking at we were talking to a lot of the companies. It's like, for example, they were quite familiar with some of the measures that have been already in place.
And Alvin, I'm going to pause you there because Finance Minister Lawrence Wong has started the budget speech. So we're going to go now to Parliament for the budget speech live. You're listening to Money FM 89.3.
Throughout these challenges, Singaporeans have rallied together and supported one another. I want to express my deep appreciation to our stout-hearted healthcare workers who have been unwavering on the front lines, as well as many others who have kept Singapore going, our public officers, our transport workers and those in social services, our safe distancing ambassadors, our hawkers and F&B operators, as well as our migrant workers. Most of all, I thank all Singaporeans for your strong cooperation and support, complying with our measures, coming forward third year. We will have to adjust to the new normal. We cannot let it change our hopes, our aspirations, our values. We are much stronger now compared to when the virus first emerged. We have improved our public health defenses and strengthened our collective resilience. We have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, and we continue to invest in and secure access to a wider range of booster and treatment options. So as we navigate this Omicron wave and any future wave of infection, I am confident that we can overcome whatever lies ahead and make further progress in our journey to live with COVID-19. We are starting the year on a positive note. Our economy has rebounded strongly from our worst recession since independence. We work through the uncertainties of COVID-19. The close tripartite partnership between the unions, employers, and the government enabled us to take decisive and timely actions to preserve jobs and create new ones even through this crisis. Our measures have borne fruit. The resident unemployment rate has come down to 3.2%, close to pre-COVID levels. The median income of full-time employed residents grew by 1% in real terms last year, after a decline of 0.4% in 2020. We expect to see steady recovery this year. Singapore will continue to benefit from the pickup in the global economy. This will be supported by more widespread vaccination and booster efforts in the major economies like the US and the Eurozone. The recovery of our key trading partners in the region will also support our growth. That said, 2022 is not free of risk. The global economy is still vulnerable to pandemic-related risk and further supply chain disruptions. Geopolitical and security risk loom, including the rising tensions in Eastern Europe. We may also see a slowdown in external demand as the major economies scale back their pandemic support and central banks tighten their accommodative monetary policies to deal with the threat of inflation. We will continue to watch these potential threats. We stand ready to respond should the situation turn for the worse. Barring fresh disruptions, I expect the Singapore economy to continue to do well. Our economy should grow by 3 to 5% this year. Our investment pipeline is also strong. This will support our efforts to create more good jobs and secure the livelihoods of all Singaporeans at all levels of the workforce. While the overall outlook is positive, I recognize that there are still segments of the economy that are still struggling. I will therefore provide targeted help for our workers and businesses in these sectors through a $500 million jobs and business support package. As part of this package, I will provide a small business recovery grant for SMEs that have been most affected by COVID-19 restrictions over the past year, like those in F&B, retail, tourism, and the hospitality sectors. SMEs in the eligible sectors will receive a payout of $1,000 per local employee, up to a cap of $10,000 per firm. Local sole proprietors and partnerships in eligible sectors, as well as SFA licensed hawkers, market, and coffee shop holders who do not hire local employees will also receive a $1,000 payout. In addition, workers who continue to face income loss due to COVID-19 can apply for the COVID-19 recovery grant, which we have extended to the end of this year. And I will also extend the jobs growth incentive by 6 months to September this year, with step-down support rates reflecting the improved labor market conditions. This extension will cover those who face greater difficulty finding jobs, like mature workers who have not been employed for 6 months or more, persons with disabilities, and ex-offenders. Aside from this package, I will continue to extend targeted assistance for the aviation sector. This includes measures to ensure public health and safety at the airport, as well as to preserve core capabilities. We must preserve and enhance our status as an international aviation hub, and the Minister for Transport will share more at the COS. As our economy reopens, the harder hit sectors should progressively see improved prospects. Meanwhile, these support measures will provide temporary relief for our businesses and workers. We are also closely monitoring the risk of rising inflation and cost of living. The rise in prices comes after an extended period of low inflation over the past decade. It has been driven mainly by the recovery in global demand amidst continuing supply chain dislocations, and especially by the rise in energy prices. We are also seeing the effects of the expansionary macroeconomic policies pursued by the US and other developed countries to revive their economies following the onset of the pandemic. And this is why the MAS had taken the preemptive step of raising the rates of appreciation of its exchange rate policy band in October last year and again last month to help dampen inflationary pressures. I recognize the immediate concerns of businesses and households and will provide significant additional support in this budget to help them tide over the current period of higher prices. For businesses, the spike in the cost of materials and electricity has led to cash flow concerns. To support companies with their cash flow needs, I will extend the temporary bridging loan program and the enhanced trade loan scheme with revised parameters for another 6 months from 1st April to 30th of September this year. I will also extend access to project loans for the domestic construction sector for another year from 1st April this year to 31st March next year. And this is on top of the foreign worker levy rebates that construction firms are receiving currently. For households, I will introduce a household support package. As part of the package, I will double the GST voucher USAVE rebates for the rest of this year. Eligible HDB households will receive additional rebates of up to $285. I will provide children below the age of 21 with a top-up of $200 each in their child development account, EduSave account, or post-secondary education account. This will be on top of their annual EduSave top-ups they already receive. I will also distribute another set of $100 CDC vouchers this year to support all Singaporean households in their daily expenses, and the vouchers can be used at participating heartland shops and hawkers. All these amount to a significant package of $560 million to help Singaporeans with their utility bills, children's education, and daily essentials. Details of the jobs and business support package and the household support package are in the annex.
You're listening to Money FM 89.3. I'm Rachel Kelly with JP Ong, and we're joined in the studio today by Alvin Liew, Senior Economist at UOB, and Chiu Hong, Partner Head of Enterprise Tax at KPMG Singapore. We've got live commentary of this year's budget speech from Finance Minister Lawrence Wong for you today. Quite a lot to digest in the first 10 minutes of the budget speech. We've got, just taking a look at my notes, the mention of a 500 million jobs and business support package. We've also got continued support for sectors impacted by the pandemic, such as aviation as well. Finance Minister Lawrence Wong also mentioned an extension of the Jobs Growth Initiative by 6 months until September this year. On first look, for the first 10 minutes, what are your thoughts? Perhaps, Woo Hong, I can start with you.
Okay. It looks like it has everything for everyone. Looks like it, businesses and household. And more importantly, the observation is that this year the help seems to is more targeted rather than broad based. So for example, the $500 million jobs and business recovery grant was only going to be given to affected sectors like aviation, tourism, which is the right thing to do, right? Because some sectors are actually recovering and some sectors are in fact doing better. So there's also the double GST rebates double up. And there's also children top-up cash for the child under 21. So all these are really looking into the low-income families and at the same time make sure that they are not badly affected by this pandemic. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the first few announcements, Alvin?
Definitely, I agree with Woo Hong on the very targeted on the companies, which I think was quite expected. This is to deal on the ongoing COVID-19 issues, especially affecting tourism, aviation related sectors, in-person services. But of course, the household portion itself, right, also a reflection of the thing that people are now worried about a lot, which is inflation. I think this reflects a lot of reflects the understanding of concerns on the ground.
Very interesting that they mentioned the MAS's preemptive step of raising the rate of appreciation, basically strengthening the Singapore dollar to help head off these inflationary pressures at the past. And it seems like it's a more targeted address actually. If the Sing dollar actually gets stronger, then suddenly your purchasing power gets stronger actually. But how much of an effect, Alvin, does this actually have in blunting some of these inflationary pressures that we're seeing at the moment? How effective has this been actually if the MAS takes the lead in making sure that inflation actually is addressed?
Okay. In terms of way the structure of Singapore economy is, we are trade dependent, and at the same time, right, most of the things we are imported. We're importer of most of the goods, and especially one of the items that has been driving up inflation is energy costs. Right. So, in terms of having a stronger Sing dollar itself, can address a lot of these issues. But on the other side of the equation, right, where the Sing dollar may not be able to fully adequately address the issue, is on the domestic wage pressures, wage pressures that will work itself into the inflation. So that is will not be addressed by the stronger Sing dollar. But on the whole itself, if you look at how the economy is structured and where the pressures are coming from currently, we see that on food prices, and we see that in commodities and energy, especially energy, and so that the approach itself on the strengthening of the Sing dollar, right, to deal with that segment of inflation is the correct measure.
You're listening to Prime Time on Money FM 89.3. We've got live budget coverage for you. We're going to head back to Finance Minister Lawrence Wong now. So far, the initiatives discussed in the budget seem to be shorter term to tackle the pandemic. We're going to head in to see what else is announced.
Countries as they seek to simplify and localize their supply chains. In short, we are entering a future where conditions are more volatile, the global environment more unpredictable, and change more fast-paced than ever. We can and must adjust and still excel in this new environment. Our enterprises and workers will need to accelerate their transformation and develop new capabilities to stay ahead of competition and look for opportunities beyond our shores and in new areas. But there will be segments of our society who are displaced. The fast pace of change can also give rise to a greater sense of anxiety and insecurity about the future. It is not the first time we have faced such concerns. When we emerged from the global financial crisis of 2009 and began restructuring our economy in earnest, we were keenly aware of those who could be left behind. And so we stepped up efforts to reskill and upskill our workers and to strengthen our social security system. We enhanced workfare and launched the progressive wage model to uplift the incomes of lower wage workers. We introduced server support to supplement the retirement income of seniors who had low incomes in their working years. We implemented MediShield Life to provide universal and lifelong protection against large hospital bills. And today, these policies have become vital pillars of our social security system. And these efforts have made our growth more inclusive. Real incomes of our local workers at the 20th percentile have risen by almost 40%, 40% between 2009 and 2019, faster than that of the median worker. Lower income workers have also benefited from our highly progressive system of taxes and transfers. Inequality after taxes and transfers, as measured by the Gini coefficient, has steadily improved over the last decade. But we cannot stop here in our efforts to strengthen our social compact. We must continue to do more in a post-pandemic future where our workers and firms will be exposed to more competition and where there will be greater churn for our businesses and livelihoods. In the coming years, we expect an increasing shift in market rewards toward those with the highest skills and those who are best able to take advantage of new technologies. This will make it harder to keep our growth inclusive and to hold our society tightly together. Besides these growing economic and employment-related risks, there are other forces on the horizon that raise the stakes in our efforts to preserve social solidarity and will also have significant implications for our future generations. We are now one of the fastest aging countries. In 2010, 9% of our population were aged 65 and above. Last year, this became 16%. By 2030, we expect Singapore to become like Japan and some European countries today, where 1 in 4 or 25% of Singaporeans will be 65 and above. Aging will mean an inexorable rise in demand for healthcare and social care. At the same time, our means to provide for this will come under strain as the ratio of our working population to aged dependents decreases. We must therefore plan ahead to ensure we have the resources needed to look after more seniors. We must also take decisive steps to join the global effort in tackling climate change. If the world is unable to cut emissions sufficiently in time and temperatures rise beyond a certain level, we risk extreme flooding and weather events. This could result in food and water stress for hundreds of millions of people around the world. Island nations like Singapore will be especially threatened. Moving to net zero emissions will be a very costly affair for Singapore, a built-up city-state with very limited scope to tap on renewable energies. But it is a cost we cannot afford to skim on, for it is existential. It affects our very survival and the Singapore that our children will live in. So we must take actions now to progressively decarbonize our economy and change our way of life. The changes brought about by the pandemic, rising geopolitical contestation, climate change, as well as domestic issues like our rapidly aging society. These are the defining challenges of our time. They call for robust policy responses to reinforce our resilience and retool our capabilities for the future. More importantly, to overcome these major tests and trials, we must continue to stand united as one. And this is why it is more important than ever to renew and strengthen our social compact and to reaffirm our values and what we stand for as a nation. Our existing social compact has been shaped by our history, beginning as a young and vulnerable nation thrust into independence. We start and maintain the basic premise that no one owes us a living and that we are responsible for our own defense and survival. The pillars underpinning our social compact, the individual, community groups, businesses, and the state, all play a role complementing one another and contributing to a system of mutual support. The individual works hard to be self-reliant and to provide for his or her family. Community groups, be it unions, charities, or voluntary associations, come together to help different groups of people. Employers do their part to invest in workers, advance their well-being, and improve the quality of jobs. The government creates the conditions for a vibrant economy, invests heavily in our citizens, and delivers essential public services. The government, working actively with the community and tripartite partners, also provides an extra hand to those who start with less, to keep social mobility a defining feature of our society, to mitigate life's inevitable inequalities, and to provide support for the elderly. Even with the demands of building a nation and reinvesting continually in our future, we have been able to keep public expenditures in Singapore extremely lean. Government spending today, excluding COVID-19 related expenditure, stands at $88 billion, or about 18% of GDP. This is probably the lowest among the more developed economies, yet it has produced social and economic outcomes that have been better than most. We generate sufficient revenues to fund this expenditure and to maintain a balanced budget. We are supported by our net investment returns contribution, or NIRC, which is a continuing stream of income from the reserves we have accumulated over the years. Over the past 5 years, NIRC provided, on average, a revenue stream of around $17 billion, or about 3.5% of GDP. So this means that for every dollar we spend on public services, about 80 cents is funded by tax, and the remaining 20 cents is funded through the NIRC. This fiscal approach has enabled us to keep our overall tax burden low. Currently, half of our workers do not have to pay personal income taxes. And in particular, for the middle income, we have deliberately ensured a low tax burden so that they can enjoy the rewards of their hard work. Put another way, for the quality of public services we have in healthcare, education, housing, transport, and many other areas, the amount of tax our citizens pay is much lower compared to many developed countries. The continental European and Nordic countries have a different social compact arising from their different histories. They have much higher levels of state-financed welfare provisions designed to meet the needs of their citizens from cradle to grave. The governments typically spend well above 30% of their GDP, 30. To fund such a spending, they impose high income taxes, usually much higher than 30%, even for the middle income group, as well as consumption taxes that range from 20 to 25%. We do not intend to adopt the European model of comprehensive universal welfare and high taxes. But as we tackle the challenges of a changing world, and as our own society ages and faces new stresses, we will have to do more to preserve and strengthen the unity of our people and our social compact. In fact, we have already been adjusting our approach over the years, with the government progressively doing more to support the community and individuals. Our social spending in particular has almost doubled from $17 billion to $31 billion over the last decade, and now takes up close to half of our annual budget. The increase has gone to programs that have made a difference in Singaporeans' lives, like higher subsidies in our healthcare system and in tertiary education, as well as schemes like Skills Future, Workfare, and Silver Support. In the coming decade, we will invest even more in our people and social infrastructure. We will spare no effort to ensure that all Singaporeans continue to have access to world-class education and healthcare, affordable housing, good jobs, and have peace of mind over their retirement needs as they grow old. We will strengthen our system of collective risk sharing so as to give Singaporeans more assurance in managing life's uncertainties. We want every Singaporean to know and feel that he or she has a stake in our society, that everyone's contributions matter, and that they will not be left to fend for themselves when times are down. We want to uphold that sense of obligation to each other and strengthen the assurance that whatever the challenges we face, we will always have each other's back. These plans require additional spending. They reflect the need to respond to lasting structural shifts in our society, as well as our new social and environmental aspirations. The spending requirements will therefore be recurring in nature, not temporary. Given this, it will not be right to dip into our reserves to meet these new needs. We must husband our reserves for use in major crises and emergencies, as was necessary during the global financial crisis, and especially in the last 2 years. We must ensure that we continue to get a steady stream of income from the reserves to benefit both today's generation of Singaporeans and our children and grandchildren. So let me summarize our fiscal outlook over the coming decade. On the expenditure side, our needs are significant and growing. By 2030, we expect government expenditures to increase to more than 20% of GDP. Most of this increase in spending will go to healthcare. On the revenue side, we will not have enough to cover the additional spending needs. The stream of income from NIRC should keep pace with economic growth over time, in spite of a more challenging global investment environment. But our sharply slowing labor force growth and hence slower GDP growth compared to the last decade will constrain our tax revenues. This is why we will make significant enhancements to our tax system in this budget. These tax adjustments will help to raise additional revenue and also contribute to a fairer revenue structure. And that means everyone chips in and contributes to a vibrant economy and strengthened social compact. But those with greater means contribute a larger share. At the same time, we are mindful of the impact of the tax increases on households and businesses, and will have a very comprehensive set of measures to cushion the impact and help Singaporeans adjust. This budget, therefore, is about charting our new way forward together. It is a first step in renewing and strengthening our social compact for a post-pandemic world, and in realizing our vision of a fairer, more sustainable, and more inclusive society. It is about giving Singaporeans the confidence to embrace the change that lies before us, so that we can grow into an ever stronger economy and nation, and an ever more secure society and home. This budget will set out the key changes we must make to invest in new capabilities, advance our green transition, renew and strengthen our social compact, and develop a fairer and more resilient revenue structure. So to stay ahead in the race, we must redouble our efforts to invest in new capabilities. Even before COVID-19, we had started to restructure our economy. And through the industry transformation maps or ITMs, we have been steadily building up the capabilities we need for the future. We have also opened up new avenues of growth by strengthening our network of free trade agreements and enhancing cooperation with like-minded partners in the digital and green economy. But much more work lies ahead. Crucially, we have a window of opportunity over the next few years to establish leading positions in key market segments. So we will accelerate our investments in new capabilities to power our next stage of growth. Our first priority is to strengthen our digital capabilities. Today, we are one of the most connected cities in the world, and amongst the first to roll out a 5G standalone network. In parallel, we have built digital utilities like SingPass, MyInfo, and PayNow that allow our people and businesses to access digital services and transact seamlessly and safely. We will invest further to meet our future needs. We will upgrade our broadband infrastructure to increase broadband access speeds by around 10 times over the next few years. We will also invest in future technologies like 6G to ride the next communications and connectivity wave. The use cases for such high speeds are still nascent, but there are many new possibilities for augmented and virtual reality tools limited only by our imagination. Alongside infrastructure improvements, I will set aside an additional $200 million over the next few years to enhance schemes that build digital capabilities in our businesses and workers. More details can be found in the annex, and the Minister for Communications and Information will also elaborate further at the COS. Second, we will push for pervasive innovation across the economy. Innovation is built on strong R&D foundations, and that is why over the years we have steadily increased the government's investment in R&D, maintaining it at about 1% of GDP, comparable to other small advanced economies. I will continue to sustain our investments in R&D with $25 billion set aside under the Research, Innovation and Enterprise, or RIE, 2025 strategy. Public investments in R&D also serve as a catalyst for similar investments in the private sector. Unfortunately, our total business expenditure on R&D still lags other economies. Presently, most of this R&D is driven by MNCs, which have greater scale and better resources. Local enterprises, which comprise about 80% of all firms, account for only about a quarter of total business R&D expenditure in Singapore. I will therefore provide more support for our local firms to undertake R&D activities. We currently have a network of more than 80 centers across our polytechnics and ITE, engaging in technology, innovation, and enterprise activities. These centers work closely with SMEs to undertake industry projects, many of which have led to new innovations. For example, Nanyang Polytechnic's Automation and Robotics Innovation Center collaborated with Sanwa Intech Asia, an SME that supplies the automotive industry, to design and implement robotics and automation solutions. Mr. Deputy Speaker, with your permission, I would like to show some slides on the screen.
Please do.
Thank you, sir. One of the solutions is a robotic tool that emulates an operator's handling of hot molded products. Previously, you will need a human operator to do the work manually. Now, they get the job done using the robotics system. So Sanwa Intech has significantly raised production volume while reducing its energy consumption. Students from Nanyang Polytechnic also had the chance to work on these projects. One of them, as you see on the screen, is Alicia Ong, who is now working at Sanwa Intech after completing her internship there. So such collaborations are a win-win. SMEs get to tap on the R&D capabilities in our polytechnics and ITE, while students can contribute meaningfully to these projects and gain valuable hands-on industry experience. So to further support such collaborations, I will increase the capacity of the centers so that they can provide research and innovation support to more SMEs. Over the next 5 years, these centers will be able to undertake close to 2,000 innovation projects across 5 pilot sectors: agri-tech, construction, food manufacturing, with precision engineering, and retail. And this amounts to an 8-fold increase in the number of innovation projects undertaken in these sectors. So we look forward to many more success stories in the coming years. Third, we will strengthen our local enterprise ecosystem. For the broad base of SMEs, our priority is to raise their productivity. SMEs can make use of the Productivity Solutions Grant, or PSG, to implement digital and automation solutions. I will set aside around $600 million to expand the range of available solutions under the PSG and push for greater take-up of productivity solutions by SMEs. We estimate this will support more than 100,000 productivity projects over the next 4 years. This is more than double the number of projects supported since the scheme began. Larger local enterprises need more customized assistance to scale up and invest in overseas markets. I will support them with a new initiative called Singapore Global Enterprises. Under this initiative, we will provide bespoke assistance tailored to the needs of promising local enterprises in areas like innovation, internationalization, and the fostering of partnerships with other firms. Many of these enterprises also need more support in talent development. So we will launch a new Singapore Global Executive Program to help them to attract and nurture the next generation of leaders through industry and overseas attachments, mentorships, and peer support networks. Besides grants and bespoke assistance, some companies also need help with their financing needs. We provide such help through the Enterprise Financing Scheme, and I will enhance 2 components of the scheme. I will expand the M&A loan program to include domestic M&A activities from 1st April this year to 31st March 2026. This will support companies to grow and expand through mergers and acquisitions. I had earlier announced the extension of the enhanced trade loan till September this year. Beyond this 6-month extension, I will maintain the enhanced 70% risk share under the trade loan for enterprises venturing into more nascent markets like Bangladesh or Brazil. And we hope this will encourage our enterprises to seek untapped opportunities in these markets. The Minister for Trade and Industry will share more about our enterprise development strategy at the COS. I will also make further refinements to our tax schemes to support businesses and strengthen our competitiveness and resilience, and more details are in the annex. Finally, and most importantly, we will continue to invest in our people. We continue to invest significantly in education to help every child achieve their full potential. Through Skills Future, we are also empowering and equipping Singaporeans for their lifelong journey of acquiring new skills and sharpening existing ones. To support this, we are transforming our Institutes of Higher Learning, or IHLs, which include the autonomous universities, into institutes for continual learning. We will review the programming in our IHLs and enhance their provision of quality continuing education and training. And the Minister for Education will say more about this at the COS. Our enterprises also play a critical role in fostering a culture of lifelong learning at the workplace. Employers are well placed to identify skills that are in demand and provide industry-relevant training. We support employers to do so through the Skills Future Enterprise Credit. Today, only employers that have had at least 3 local employees and contributed at least $750 of skills development levy over a qualifying period are eligible for this credit, and these have tended to be larger enterprises. To better support our smaller and micro enterprises, I will grant a waiver of the skills development levy requirement for the qualifying period of 1st January 2021 to 31st December 2021. This is estimated to double the number of eligible employers from 40,000 today to 80,000. The deadline to claim the credit will also be extended by a year to 30th of June 2024 to give employers more time to use the credit. To maximize the investments in our people, we must also ensure a good match between the skills demanded by the industry and those offered by the workforce. And this means bringing together the various parties involved, training providers, employment facilitation providers, employers, and job seekers themselves, to anticipate the areas where new skills are required and ensure that effective training is provided in a timely manner. At the same time, employers need to redesign jobs to harness technology more effectively and make better use of the upgraded skills of their workers. Our tripartite partners, especially the unions, help to achieve this. And one approach that NTUC has championed and that has proved effective is the Company Training Committees, or CTCs. The CTC model brings together the unions and employers to develop concrete firm-level transformation plans, including the relevant training needed for their workers so that they can enjoy better wages, welfare, and prospects. These plans are then implemented with the support of relevant government agencies. To date, NTUC has formed more than 800 CTCs with companies of various sizes. One SME that has benefited from this partnership is Speco Singapore. Speco started out in cleaning services and later shifted its operations to provide disinfection services through technology solutions. The Building, Construction and Timber Industries Employees Union, or BATU, worked with Speco management to form a CTC and to map out the training needed to reskill its workforce. And one beneficiary is Shamsul Nuharkim, who joined Speco on a work-study program. Shamsul will be completing a diploma in applied science from Republic Polytechnic this year under the sponsorship of Speco. Through the support of the CTC, he has acquired new skills and will be well positioned to excel in his career. NTUC would like to do more. I will therefore set aside about $100 million to support NTUC in its efforts to scale up the CTCs. Part of this will go into a new grant, which will be administered by NTUC to support companies that have set up CTCs to implement their transformation plans.
Your voice, your thoughts, your needs. Money FM Budget Conversations 2022. Presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG and Reach.
You're listening to Prime Time on Money FM 89.3. I'm Rachel Kelly with finance presenter JP Ong. We're joined in the studio today by Chiu Hong, partner head of enterprise tax at KPMG Singapore, and Alvin Liew, senior economist at UOB, for live budget commentary. Thank you both for staying with us today. Thank you. Okay, so let's get down to what has been announced so far in the budget. We did see Finance Minister Lawrence Wong. He spoke about why higher taxes are needed. He mentioned on the revenue side, we will not have enough to cover the additional spending needs. He also said this is why we will make significant enhancements to our tax system in this budget, although the details are yet to be announced from the budget speech. We're still waiting for those. He also highlighted that we want every Singaporean to know and feel that he or she has a stake in our society. Now, earlier on, we were talking about SMEs and support needed for SMEs to tie them through not only the short term, the medium, but also the long term when it comes to growth post-pandemic. We've seen a number of initiatives that have just been announced by Finance Minister Lawrence Wong. We've got the new Singapore Global Enterprises Initiative. We've also got the new Singapore Global Executive Program. What are your thoughts on this?
Definitely the support given. And first, in general, the mode itself, right? You've seen that now it is more on the longer term. We have really shifted out versus the previous few budgets where there was a lot more focus on the short-term issues to deal with the pandemic. So this is definitely that clear shift that was expected. But I think I think in UOB itself, we did some survey before and on the recently from the SME's point of view, right? And a lot of these companies, it seems that they are familiar with a lot of the schemes. However, the take-up rate has been not as high as the awareness. So that gap itself needs to be improved. And I think a lot of the measures may be announced here, right, where they have lowered the barrier levels and they have made it customized. And that may actually help more of these companies, SMEs, especially if you are trying to help them, to take up these initiatives. I think certainly the help is there, but I think the need for it to make it for customized for them, that they can take this up, right, is also important. And I think that some parts of it have been addressed in whatever that the Minister Wong has put forth. But of course, at the last end, I just want to add is that one of the points that he said that it was going to be a fairer and more resilient revenue structure, right? That itself maybe rings a bell that something else is brewing in the pot beyond the GST, because GST, as we know, is more regressive. So if it is a more fairer and more resilient revenue structure, right, I would like to think something to look forward to in the later part of his speech then.
See what else is brewing. Wu Hong, what are your thoughts?
I would like to think that probably there will be some form of wealth taxes, maybe in the form of higher property tax or stamp duties, property related. But let's see what the minister will have to say. But coming back to Alvin's point on the global enterprises initiative, I echo what he says, that nowadays the solution given or the package given, the grants given by the governments are more bespoke and more targeted, so that we can achieve a better outcome rather than giving the company the money and up to them to spend the money. Some of them may not know how to do it, may not have the skill set to navigate the journey on embarking on innovation, on transformation, and the money may not put to good use. So having a tailored package also helps the government to really administer the approval of the grants faster, and also have more transparency and better control. So I think we are heading in the right directions. And this budget also show us that the plan are more targeted, more defined, and is very clear. The question now remains to be seen who are these entities or companies that may qualify for to come under this Singapore Global Enterprise.
We talked about this budget becoming more targeted actually towards certain industries. Do you think that in terms of driving innovation in Singapore, that they also have to take a similar approach of being very targeted towards certain industries? Because we know innovation, perhaps it's not a one size fits all, because the industries and their needs, their challenges, and also the necessity for them to have innovation, perhaps it's different depending on whether or not you're in food and beverage versus you're in a factory versus, let's say, you're in a biomedical facility, for instance. How nuanced do you think, and should they probably be in terms of targeting the support for driving innovation for some of these industries, especially some of the SMEs here?
That's right. That's why the government is trying to marry the industry with the school, with the universities, and together with the feedback and business requirement from the business, so that all three parties can come together and come up with a bespoke solution. It's about demand and supply. At one hand, you can get the students that are excited and have an internship ability, the taste of working with the businesses. At the same time, you can nurture them. At the same time, you have the businesses who bigger MNC who can impart their knowledge to the SME. And that for the SMEs to also tap onto their technology and learn along the way. So it's a very good way of packaging together and marrying them all together.
It's very one thing that really struck out for me was something that Minister Wong brought up, is that most R&D is actually driven by some of these multinationals, and so far local enterprises, which comprise about 80% of all firms, account for only a quarter of total business R&D expenditure. Is there a difference here? Is this something that maybe larger scale companies with more resources like MNCs will probably be more akin towards saying, you know what, let's take advantage of the environment in Singapore and drive some of our R&D activities here, versus say a local company here who's probably maybe a bit reticent to actually do that? What are your thoughts as to why perhaps MNCs are a bit more open towards spending on R&D versus say SMEs here, and should the gap be closed or perhaps fostered to be closed?
I think it's definitely a matter of resources, and of course, the bigger the company with more resources and their planning of looking at it beyond the horizon of just like survival. Well, if you're looking at a SME, right, and the smaller you get, right, the priorities is very different. But while they understand the need to innovate, things like that, but the priorities are different. And I think the right direction where this is going is to help these SMEs, right, to embark on this journey of innovation, while you are also helping the industry itself to move forward. And I think they also have it very much structured. I think I caught like at least 3 areas that they were looking at, right? Agri, tech, construction, and food manufacturing. And this, perhaps, especially at things like food manufacturing, it may be it recognizes that a lot of the SMEs these are the businesses where they are in. Versus if you are looking at, for example, pharmaceuticals, you are unlikely to find SMEs within that segment itself. So I think it has to be in a way targeted in the industry, but it also helps this industry move forward, which is where the good part is, and they can move to become the next big CP in in the food industry, for example.
And when you're talking about SMEs growth in R&D, Finance Minister gave a number of examples. He shared that students from Nanyang Poly also had the chance to work on a number of projects at Sanwa Intech after completing internships there. And he said that he's going to increase the capacity of the centers so that they can provide research and innovation support to more SMEs. And over the next 5 years, these centers are going to be able to undertake close to 2,000 innovation projects, as you mentioned, Alvin, across 5 pilot sectors: agri-tech, construction, food manufacturing, precision engineering, as well as retail. So some key growth sectors there as well.
Yes. Again, these sectors itself, right? I think when you look at it, it's like retail, right? You usually do see them starting out really small, and they do need that help if they need to innovate. I think that's the right direction to go. And some of them, I think they also encompasses some element, like I think construction itself. I think the idea is also that it has always been very human intensive, labor intensive, and the way forward, especially what the pandemic has shown us, right, is that we need to shift away from that to move to a more capital intensive way of building, and I think that's where we see those.
Yeah, and just to add on, these sectors are chosen for a reason, and also probably their productivity level has been traditionally quite low in terms of able to scale up and automate is also quite low. So I think they need more help. So that's where the school and universities and the business people come in to share their ideas on their technologies, their work processes, and then hopefully we can scale up and bring this sector up the productivity curve to R&D.
You're listening to Primetime on Money FM 89.3 with live commentary on this year's budget speech by Finance Minister Lawrence Wong. We're going to head back now to listen to the speech.
We do not have the land for wind or solar energy to be sufficient for our own needs. But thankfully, green technologies have been improving by leaps and bounds. Alternative low carbon solutions like carbon capture, utilization and storage, and hydrogen are starting to look more plausible. Carbon markets are also growing steadily. At COP26, Singapore helped to finalize a landmark decision on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which unlocks the door for carbon credits to be traded on a global basis. Such developments give us greater confidence to review our long-term climate goals. 2 years ago, we made an international commitment to peak our emissions around 2030. And we also announced our long-term low emissions development strategy, or LEDS, to halve our emissions from its peak by 2050 and to achieve net zero emissions as soon as viable in the second half of the century. Singapore takes these commitments very seriously. We are on track to achieving our 2030 target. We have since reviewed our longer-term plans. With advances in technology and new opportunities for international collaboration in areas like carbon markets, we believe we can bring forward our net zero timeline. We will therefore raise our ambition to achieve net zero emissions by or around mid-century. We will consult closely with industry and citizen stakeholder groups to firm up and finalize our plans before making a formal revision of our LEDS later this year. To achieve this net zero ambition, we will need to set the right price of carbon so that businesses and individuals will be able to internalize the cost of carbon and take actions to moderate their emissions. When we introduced the carbon tax in 2019, we kept the initial tax low at $5 per ton of emissions to give businesses time to adjust. To move decisively to achieve our new net zero ambition, we will need a higher carbon tax. I will therefore raise our carbon tax to $25 per ton in 2024 and 2025, and $45 per ton in 2026 and 2027, with a view to reaching $50 to $80 per ton by 2030. The current tax of $5 per ton will remain unchanged until 2023, as previously stated. And we are pacing the increases to the carbon tax between now and 2030 and will announce subsequent increases ahead of time. This will provide certainty for businesses. Besides this, we will not impose an additional carbon tax on the use of petrol, diesel, and compressed natural gas. These already have excise duties that encourage users to moderate their fuel consumption and hence emissions. We will continue to review and adjust these fuel excise duties periodically. I appreciate that some businesses and households may require support as they adjust to the carbon tax increase. For example, we are mindful that firms in our emissions-intensive and trade-exposed sectors may face higher costs than those in countries with lower or no carbon tax. Some will need a little more time to make the necessary reduction in emissions or investment in cleaner technologies. So to support such firms and manage the near-term impact on their competitiveness, we will put in place a transition framework. Such transition frameworks are found in many countries with carbon taxes. They provide existing companies with allowances for a share of their emissions. For our framework, the allowances will be determined based on efficiency standards and decarbonization targets. This will help mitigate the impact on business costs while still encouraging decarbonization. We will continue to engage affected companies on the design of the framework prior to its implementation in 2024. From 2024, we will also allow businesses to use high-quality international carbon credits to offset up to 5% of their taxable emissions in lieu of paying carbon tax. This will moderate the impact for companies. It will also help create local demand for high-quality carbon credits and catalyze the development of well-functioning and regulated carbon markets. We will also do more to support companies, especially SMEs, to invest in energy-efficient equipment and decarbonization solutions. For households, the higher carbon tax will be felt mainly through an increase in utility bills. At $25 per ton, this would translate to an increase of about $4 per month in the utility bills for an average 4-room HDB household. We will provide support, such as additional USAFE rebates, to help cushion the impact during the transition. And more details will be announced next year ahead of the carbon tax increase in 2024. I should clarify that I do not expect to derive additional revenue from this increase in the carbon tax. Some of the revenue will be used to cushion the impact on households and businesses. A large part of the revenue will be used to support a decisive shift toward decarbonization through investments in new low-carbon and more energy-efficient solutions. These investments will help to lower our emissions and bring us closer towards our net zero goal. The path towards net zero will entail significant economic restructuring and changes in how we live and work in the future. All of us, the public, businesses, the government, will face difficult choices. Costly investments may be required, for example, to import or generate low-carbon energy. But now is the time when we must move decisively toward the future of a net zero world. This will allow us to tap fully on the many exciting possibilities in this green transition. And that is why we launched the Singapore Green Plan 2030 last year, to bring everyone on board our sustainability movement. Over the coming decade, we expect to see a greening of traditional sectors of our economy, like aviation, energy, and tourism. At the same time, emerging green sectors like green finance and carbon services will grow in prominence. Millions of new green jobs will be created around the world, and demand for talent with green skills will increase. Moving quickly will position Singapore to build on our competitive advantages to capture these opportunities. We can become the go-to location in Asia for expertise in carbon services and the trusted regional marketplace for carbon credits. As a keynote for international air and sea transport networks, we can become a forerunner, a front runner in the development of sustainable aviation and marine fuels. In the financial services sector, for example, green finance is one of the fastest growing segments. Singapore now accounts for close to half of the ASEAN green bond and loan market. We aim to do more so that banks and financial institutions will use Singapore as a base to develop their capabilities and to develop innovative green financial solutions to service their customers all over Asia and the world. The public sector will do its part to develop a robust green finance market. We aim to issue up to $35 billion of green bonds by 2030 to fund public sector green infrastructure projects. This will include bonds issued by the government as well as statutory boards. The government will also publish a Singapore Green Bond Framework and issue its inaugural green bond later this year. Green finance is just one of many exciting new areas of green growth. As I mentioned just now, there are many more such opportunities across every sector of the economy. We aim to move Singapore into the forefront of green technologies, where new innovations are developed, trialed, scaled up, and eventually exported to the rest of the world. We will work hard to grab first mover advantage and develop new engines of growth in the green economy. Another important pillar of the Singapore Green Plan is to transform our living environment, make it a greener and more sustainable home and a beautiful city in nature for all to enjoy. And one aspect we've been focusing on is transport. We aim to be a car-light city supported by a comprehensive public transport network, which is the cleanest and most energy-efficient mode of transport. And this is why we are maintaining our policy of zero growth rate for private vehicles. We are perhaps the only city in the world which has taken this bold step. For those who wish to drive, we want their vehicles to be cleaner. Hence, we had announced our intention to phase out internal combustion engine vehicles by 2040. For passenger vehicles, the most promising clean energy option is electric vehicles or EVs. We have provided significant incentives for EV adoption. In fact, within a year, the EV share of new car registrations has jumped from just 0.2% in 2020 to around 4% last year. Given this momentum, we will further accelerate EV adoption by building more charging points closer to where we live. To do this, infrastructure upgrades will be necessary, and the financing can come from green bonds. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Singapore is fully committed to doing our part on the global climate change agenda. Various ministers will elaborate more on our efforts under the Singapore Green Plan at the COS, because this is truly a whole of government effort. In advancing our green transition, we will strive to be a bright green spark and to secure a more sustainable future for ourselves and for the world. Sir, the priority of this government has always been to build a fair and just society where every citizen is able to develop to their fullest potential and share in the country's progress. And we are continually evolving our policies as circumstances change to achieve these goals. In our earlier decades, we had 3 pillars in our social security system: subsidize public housing through HDB, to make home ownership a reality for the vast majority of Singaporeans. The current tax, CPF, to help every working Singaporean save in order to own a home and build a nest egg for retirement. And the 3 M's of MediSave, MediShield, and MediFund, together with government subsidies to provide Singaporeans with affordable and quality healthcare. Over the years, we have strengthened these pillars. We enhanced the CPF so that members with lower balances can benefit from extra interest on their retirement savings. In public housing, we are not just helping Singaporeans own a home, but also upgrading older flats and rejuvenating estates. In healthcare, we have gone beyond the original 3 M's. We introduced MediShield Life to provide lifelong universal insurance for hospital bills. And as elderly care needs grew, we introduced CareShield Life and Elder Fund to support our seniors. We also added new pillars of support. We put in place ComCare to help people through temporary difficulties and get support while they are being trained for new jobs. We implemented Workfare to uplift our lower wage workers, and to complement Workfare, we introduced Silver Support to provide an additional plank of support for seniors with limited lifetime earnings. Besides these 5 pillars of social support, we have invested more heavily in education as a social leveler and a source of opportunity for every Singaporean. In recent years, we have been investing more, not just in the formal years of schooling, but also through life, starting with Kids Start, preschool, and extending through adulthood through Skills Future. Over the past year, we have engaged around 6,000 participants in our conversations on Singapore women's development. Many good ideas have come up, from better support for caregivers to stronger measures against workplace discrimination. When the plans are ready, the government will commit resources and work with our partners to realize them. So we have been doing more to strengthen our social compact over the years and across many fronts. But as new stresses emerge and as we enter a more volatile and unpredictable environment, we will take further decisive steps to strengthen the architecture of social security and opportunity for all Singaporeans. Our healthcare needs in particular will grow as our population ages. We will need to help revamp our healthcare ecosystem to cater to more geriatric needs across various care settings. Healthcare will therefore be the major driver of increased social spending in the coming decade. In every area of spending, however, it is not just a matter of spending more, but also how we spend to achieve the right outcomes and to preserve the values of individual responsibility and mutual support from the community, even as the government steps in to do more. These are complex issues. We are studying them systematically in an effort to renew and strengthen our social compact for a post-pandemic world. We will start with a few major moves in this budget, which I will explain in turn. First, we will do more to uplift lower wage workers. The government has accepted and will implement the recommendations of the tripartite work group on lower wage workers. So over the next 2 years, we will extend the progressive wage model to the retail, food services, and waste management sectors. We will also extend it to in-house cleaners, security officers, landscape workers, administrators, and drivers across all sectors. Companies employing foreign workers will be required to pay all their local employees at least the local qualifying salary, which is currently set at $1,400 per month. We will also launch a progressive wage mark, or PW mark, to accredit firms that pay progressive wages and the local qualifying salary. The government will require all our eligible suppliers to be accredited with the PW mark when they contract with us from March 2023. All of us, businesses, consumers, and taxpayers, will have to do our part and contribute to uplifting our lower wage workers. I recognize that some firms may need time to adjust to these changes. Some have locked in long-term contracts based on certain wage assumptions and now face higher manpower costs. Others may find it difficult to raise prices in the short term to support the wage increases. I will therefore introduce the Progressive Wage Credit Scheme, or PWCS, to provide transitional support for businesses. Under the PWCS, the government will co-fund the wage increases of lower wage workers between 2022 and 2026. For workers earning up to $2,500, the PWCS co-funding rate will be 50% in the first 2 years, 30% in the next 2 years, before tapering to 15% in 2026. We will also provide some support for workers earning above $2,500 and up to $3,000 at a lower co-funding ratio. With this, the government will be co-sharing with employers a significant portion of the cost increase. We will set up a PWCS fund for this purpose and start with a $2 billion injection this year. This will provide certainty of funding for the wage increases over the next 5 years. To complement the progressive wages, the moves on progressive wages, I will also significantly enhance the workfare income supplement. This will give a further boost to our lower wage workers. From 1st January 2023, I will raise the qualifying income cap from the current $2,300 to $2,500 per month. This means more workers will get to benefit from workfare. I will introduce a minimum income criterion for workfare at $500 per month to encourage part-timers and casual workers to take up regular full-time work. I will extend workfare to younger workers aged 30 to 34 so that they can start saving for housing and retirement earlier in their careers. They will receive a maximum annual payout of $2,100. I will also raise workfare payouts. Those aged 35 to 44 will receive a maximum annual payout of $3,000. Those aged 45 to 59 will receive a maximum annual payout of $3,600. Those aged 60 and above will receive the highest maximum payout tier of $4,200 annually. And I will extend this same maximum payout tier to all persons with disabilities, regardless of their age. The enhanced workfare is expected to benefit more than 500,000 workers. Our moves on progressive wages will cover around 94% of our full-time lower wage workers. The enhanced workfare will provide further support to all eligible Singaporean lower wage workers. So through the combination of progressive wages and workfare, we expect the incomes of our lower wage workers to grow faster than the median wage growth over the coming decade. So as our economy grows and society progresses, we will reduce income disparities in our workforce. In aggregate, we will spend an average of $1.8 billion per year over the next 5 years, or $9 billion in total for the PWCS and the enhanced workfare. It is a significant increase, and it reflects our shared commitment to uplift our lower wage workers in Singapore. Next, we will enhance the retirement adequacy of Singaporeans, especially for senior workers who are preparing for retirement. Following the recommendations of the tripartite work group on older workers, we will continue to increase the employer and the employee CPF contribution rates for workers aged 55 to 70. We implemented the first increase this year and have been providing employers with a 1-year CPF transition offset equivalent to half of the increase in employer CPF contributions. We will continue with the next step of increase in 2023 and provide employers with a similar offset. This means that workers aged 55 to 70 will see a total increase of 3 to 4 percentage points in their CPF contribution rates over these 2 years. Additionally, with rising standards of living, we will adjust the CPF Basic Retirement Sum, or BRS, to provide members with higher monthly CPF payouts in their retirement years. We will raise the BRS by 3.5% per year for the next 5 cohorts turning 55 from 2023 to 2027. There is no requirement for members to top up their CPF if they are unable to set aside their BRS. Those who set aside the BRS when they turn 55 in 2027 will receive payouts of close to $1,000 per month when they are 65, and these payouts will continue for the rest of their lives. This will give them...
You're listening to Prime Time on Money FM 89.3. I'm Rachel Kelly with finance presenter JP Ong, and we're joined in the studio today by Chiu Partner Head of Enterprise Tax at KPMG Singapore, and Alvin Liew, Senior Economist at UOB. We're listening to Finance Minister Lawrence Wong's speech live here in the studio and providing live update and analysis from our two experts that join us today. Gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us today. Thank you. So let's get back to what we've just covered during that section of the budget speech. We've covered a lot, from sustainability to just now. Finance Minister Lawrence Wong stated that they're going to raise the BRS, that is by 3.5% per year for the next 5 cohorts turning 55 from 2023 to 2027. We're, of course, talking about the CPF basic retirement sum. Alvin, what are your thoughts on that?
On that, of course, this has to do with we as an aging society, and people now live longer, and that is trying to meet more of the requirement needs when you age. But
Cost of healthcare.
But I suspect this might not be going down too well with some people.
In other news we had from the finance minister, he also said that we're going to continue with the next step of the increase in 2023. And there's also a 1-year CPF transition offset equivalent to half of the increase in employer CPF contributions. When we're looking at retirement, we're looking about balancing costs. We're also talking about tax as well. That's still to come.
Yes. I think I also like to talk a bit about other things. Of course, the one of the main features that came out before that, before the retirement, they talk about how to uplift the low
wage workers. That's right.
I think that is really a significant piece of like, if you look at the cost itself, right, based on that and the improvement on workfare, right, that works to be about on a 5-year horizon close to slightly more than 9 billion Sing dollars. That's quite a big portion, and also shows commitment to try to lift to look at it at the most basic level, the income levels of the lower wage, where we would see our most vulnerable segment of the society that's receiving that help, which is the right direction where they should be that is where it's going. But also ahead of that, the surprising portion, not surprising, I guess, we have seen it coming, but perhaps the timing was still a bit. We are still in the nascent part of this recovery, whereby they also have increased the minimum wage of the S Pass and employment pass. I think that is something that would have to come into the system. But I would think that the timing itself, given again the nascent nature of the recovery, and some sectors would have still be in a different state of where that recovery process. I mean, if you are thriving, right, then this may not work as negatively to you. But if you are on the mend as a like on the tourism side, right, this could actually be quite painful.
And before we get into the details there, let's just recap, because Finance Minister mentioned that over the next 2 years, they're going to extend the progressive wage model to retail, food services and waste management sectors. It was also announced that there will be an introduction of a progressive wage credit scheme, or PWCS, to provide transitional support to businesses.
I can add my perspective to what Alvin had just said. You can see that as a help for the local low wages workers, right? But on the other hand, businesses may think that this is going to increase my costs, right? And the transitional measure is only transition, it's only temporary. What's next after that? The wage will continue to be high. So you can see that there is what the government is trying to signal to the businesses is there's an urgent need for you guys to upgrade, innovate, and increase your value chains in terms of your work and generate more revenue. So I'm going to help you meanwhile, but make sure that you cannot just continue to use cheap labor and you must adopt technology, you must automate, you must transform yourself. So there's many packages here that the government is helping you. So therefore, this increase of wages for the worker plus my transitional help, but you also must do your part to make sure that you innovate. So this is how the message is being seen as as a win-win situation for everyone. It's a
That's really interesting because we talked about the efforts to try and make sure that companies can digitize, adopt new solutions for the future. Also, the wage scheme here, of course, also trying to tackle the inequalities we're seeing in Singapore, making sure that lower wage workers can actually uplift. Is this the budget's way of trying to kill two birds with one stone?
You can say that, yeah, it's a very well thought through strategy, I would say. In a way, helping the workers at the same time, nudging the companies to innovate and transform. So this is a time there's an urgency to it. I'm giving you help to do it, but the help is not permanent. No, the wages will continue to. If you don't increase your productivity, you cannot generate the revenue. Then you become a cost to you in future. So there's some companies have to take that.
In some ways,
signal,
it's a bet by the budget as well and the government that, look, we're going to help you guys transition. We're going to raise these wages, but hopefully this will nudge you guys to implementing these more efficient solutions. The big question is it actually going to work? Because in theory, theory is one thing, and practice is another, right?
Yeah, but I think when you look at it, I probably look at this at really at the carrot and stick thing.
Okay,
we give you the carrot. So the help you on the innovation and to tie up with the relevant the centers where you can do all the innovation. But then on the other side, of course, I refer back to again the increase of the minimum wage of the S-Pass, also for construction sector specifically, the DRC has been lowered further.
And let's just look at those numbers. So the change in the numbers that we've got for the S-Pass. So for new employment pass applicants, it'll be raised from the current $4,500 to $5,000. We're talking about the minimum qualifying salary. For the financial services sector, which has higher salaries, that's going to be raised from $5,000 to $500. And from September, we'll also see further increases across the board as well. For S-Pass, we're going to see a minimum qualifying salary from the current $2,500 to $3,000. And as you mentioned, the dependency ratio, that's shifting from 1.7 to 1.5.
Yes. Yep. So specifically to the construction sector, because it was mentioned earlier as all the five sectors that they're looking at to do the innovation, construction is one of them. So that looks like that, definitely the carrot, and this looks like the stick.
Yeah, and the other way to look at it is that we want businesses to bring in the right skill set of people from overseas. So it's not about quality, not quantity, right? So therefore, I want you guys to bring in talent that we cannot find in Singapore. So therefore, probably you have to pay a little bit more. But I don't want you to get people or talent you can find in Singapore. So it's about getting the right people to help you in your businesses.
What are your thoughts on the shift in quantum from, it's $500 boost for all of the employment pass SP and WP?
Yes, like I said, it's for industries that are thriving in the current environment, right? I think this is something that they will look at, but they can work it out. But in industries that are actually that are struggling, right? So that would really make a big difference, and we have to relook at their manpower. I think needs basically. Yeah.
And moving on from manpower, we've got to talk about a little bit earlier on sustainability. We were all looking to talk about the carbon tax, and the numbers have been revealed.
Yes.
So from the current price of $5 per ton in 2024, this is going to go up to $25 per ton for 2024 and 2025. In 2026, this goes up to $45. And by 2030, it's going to hit $50 to $80. Is that in line with your expectations?
Well, I knew it will increase, but it's a bit higher than what I expected. But if you compare to the European country, it's still low in that context, right? But I think this is the right direction. In order to change behavior, the pricing has to be increased from the current $5, sorry.
Yeah.
So, but as the government also wrote transition measures and things, and also rebates and help to cushion some of these pass on costs to the household in terms of rebates and things like that. So we need to see the details to see how does it impact. But as what the government says, right, the revenue generated from carbon tax is not going to be significant, and in fact, some of the money will be to subsidize the household that is directly impacted. The other larger part of it will be actually power back to businesses to allow them to channel their resources to adopt green technologies, etc. So it's already taking money from you and then giving you back, but in a way that's beneficial for the infrastructure of Singapore and still reach the climate ambition.
And the example that Finance Minister Lawrence Wong gave is that with the 25 increase by 2024, that's the equivalent of $4 per month for the average 4-room HDB.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting because he did rightfully say they're not trying to make extra money out of this. They want to plow a lot of this back into helping decarbonization, helping invest in new low carbon and more energy efficient solutions. $5 to $25 a ton. Do we have an idea of how much that actually can be plowed back in? Is there any off the just the front of the envelope calculations that we can do at the moment?
Honestly, I do not have that prowess to calculate. But what I do note from his statement is that I think he put that there's no revenue. He's not putting in any revenue from this into the budget. So I think it's quite clear that this will be, in that sense, it will be net zero effort from the government itself. But what is interesting is while we compare it to European countries, which just now I guess the number is about, I think equivalent in terms of Sing dollars, 140 for the UK and above $140 for UK and France. But however, some industries are not facing UK and France as competitors. Some of the countries some of the industries here, their competitors are found in countries around the region. So that should be I think the question that you would be asking some of these industries, if their competitors are all facing lower or no carbon tax, then how is the competitive landscape? Which I think they do, in his speech, he also recognizes that. And they need to, I think this is something that needs to be addressed.
Still, it's a 5x jump, right? From $5 to $25 in 2 years. And that 2 years, of course, we talked about this being the transition period. I think the question is this going to be enough time to help companies transition? Is 2 years going to be enough or too little to adjust to this 5-fold increase?
For me right now, I think it's very hard to tell just by the headline numbers.
Yeah.
Like I said, the rates are fairly different. I think on my chart itself, other than Brazil, which is lower than us, we're the second lowest in there. And on the other extreme end, or in the middle, somewhere in the middle, you have US sitting around $20 or 23 Sing dollars per ton. And on the extreme end, you got 140 above for France. Actually, the idea is that depends the company that is in question, right? Who is the competition they are facing in which country is it?
And
that's the problem.
Speaking of tax, we're going to go back now to Finance Minister Lawrence Wong. He is speaking about tax live in Parliament. Let's tune in.
The profit of the largest and most profitable multinational enterprises, or MNEs, from where activities are conducted to where consumers are located. There are ongoing international discussions on how to determine the jurisdictions which will surrender profits for reallocation to the markets under Pillar 1 and how much each will have to surrender. Given our small domestic market and the extent of activity is conducted here by MNEs, Singapore will lose tax revenue under Pillar 1. Pillar 2 introduces, amongst other things, a global minimum effective tax rate of 15% for MNE groups with annual global revenues of 750 million euros or more under its global anti-base erosion or GLOBE model rules. What this means is that if such an MNE were to have an effective tax rate of less than 15% in Singapore at the group level, other jurisdictions, such as its home jurisdiction, can collect the difference up to 15%. We will adjust our tax system in response to Pillar 2 GLOBE rules. We are exploring a top-up tax called the Minimum Effective Tax Rate, or METR. The METR will top up the MNE group's effective tax rate in Singapore to 15%. IRAS will study this further and consult the industry on the design of METR. We will also continue to closely monitor international developments before making any decisions on the METR. At this stage, it is premature and difficult to determine the eventual fiscal impact of both pillars. As I mentioned just now, there will be a negative revenue impact under Pillar 1. METR might yield some additional tax revenue in the short term, but the eventual impact of Pillar 2 on our revenue will depend on how governments and companies respond. The net impact of both pillars depends on the rules and details which are still being developed by the inclusive framework on BEPS. While BEPS 2.0 may have reduced the scope for tax competition, it has not reduced global competition for investments. In fact, competition is likely to intensify as governments worldwide seek to restore and rebuild their economies after the effects of the pandemic. So there may be less tax competition, but there will be other forms of competition. And we will have to take this into consideration and ensure that Singapore remains one of the best places in the world for business. We will therefore need more time to study these issues thoroughly and will announce changes in the corporate tax system when we are ready. Where personal income tax is concerned, there is room for greater progressivity so that those who earn more contribute more. I will therefore increase the top marginal personal income tax, or PIT rate, with effect from the year of assessment 2024. The portion of chargeable income in excess of $500,000 up to $1 million will be taxed at 23%, while that in excess of $1 million will be taxed at 24%, both up from 22% today. This increase is expected to affect the top 1.2% of personal income taxpayers and will raise $170 million of additional tax revenue per year. Next, wealth taxes. This is an important part of the tax system. Apart from generating revenue, they also help to recirculate a portion of the wealth stock into our economy and in so doing mitigate social inequalities. Wealth taxes are therefore needed to build a fairer society where everyone can aspire to succeed regardless of their backgrounds. Currently, we tax wealth in several ways, through property tax, stamp duties, and the additional registration fee, or ARF, for motor vehicles. So the higher value the residential property or motor vehicle, the higher the tax rate. Ideally, we would want to tax the net wealth of individuals. But such a tax is not easy to implement effectively. Estimating wealth accurately and fairly is a more complex exercise than estimating incomes. Further, many forms of wealth are mobile. And as long as there are differences in wealth taxes across jurisdictions, such wealth can and will move. Singapore is not alone in facing such challenges. Countries like Germany, France, and Denmark have stopped levying taxes on individuals' net wealth. The number of OECD countries that levy net wealth taxes has dropped from 12 in 1990 to only 3 in 2020. And this is partly because of the difficulties in effectively implementing net wealth taxes. We will continue to study the experiences of other countries and explore options to tax wealth effectively. In the meantime, we will strengthen our current system of taxes. In particular, I will make several adjustments to property tax, which is currently our principal means of taxing wealth. I will increase the property tax rates for non-owner occupied residential properties, which includes investment properties. For such properties, I will increase the property tax rates from 10 to 20% currently, the current range, to 12 to 36%. All non-owner occupied residential properties will face higher property taxes, and the increase will be more significant for properties at the higher end. With these changes, a large non-owner occupied detached house in the central area with annual value, say, of $150,000 will see an annual property tax bill of about $43,000 per year. For owner-occupied residential properties, I will increase the property tax rates for the portion of annual value in excess of $30,000 from today's 4 to 16% to 6% to 32%. This increase will impact the top 7% of owner-occupied residential properties. The increase will be higher for properties at the top end. So to illustrate, with the same landed property with annual value of $150,000, if this is owner-occupied, the new property tax bill will be about $28,000 per year. The increases in property tax rates will be implemented in 2 steps, starting with the tax payable in 2023. When fully implemented, they will raise our property tax revenue by about $380 million per year. I will also tax luxury cars at a higher rate to make our vehicle tax system more progressive. I will introduce an additional ARF tier for cars at a rate of 220% for the portion of open market value in excess of $80,000. The new rates will apply to all cars registered with COEs obtained from the second COE bidding round this month. And the additional ARF is expected to generate an additional $50 million in revenue this year. Finally, the GST. The revenue from the increase in GST will go towards supporting our healthcare expenditure and to take care of our seniors. In fact, the GST revenue by itself will not be sufficient to cover our additional healthcare spending. And further, as I shared earlier, other areas of social spending are rising too. And this is why we need not only the GST increase, but also the changes to personal income tax, property tax, and vehicle tax, which I just announced. Where the timing of GST is concerned, I have carefully considered the overall situation, the ongoing pandemic, the state of our economy, and the outlook for inflation. Our revenue needs are pressing, but I also understand the concerns that Singaporeans have about the GST increase taking place at the same time as rising prices. I have therefore decided to delay the GST increase to 2023 and to stagger the increase over 2 steps. The first increase will take place on 1st January 2023 from 7 to 8%, and the second increase on 1st January 2024 from 8 to 9%. I want to assure all Singaporeans that we will continue to implement the GST in our unique Singaporean way, with features and schemes that support the less well-off. I will continue to absorb GST on publicly subsidized healthcare and education. I will provide town councils with an additional $15 million per year to absorb the additional GST payable on service and conservancy charges. I will not increase government fees and charges for 1 year from 1st January 2023. This will apply to license fees as well as fees charged by government agencies for the provision of services. And this includes school fees, ITE and polytechnic fees, and charges in public car parks. To address concerns that businesses could use GST as a cover to raise prices, the government will stand up a committee against profiteering. The committee will be chaired by Minister of State for Trade and Industry, Ms. Low Yen Ling. We had earlier announced a $6 billion assurance package to cushion the impact of the GST increase for all Singaporeans. I will provide an additional top-up of $640 million to the assurance package. The enhanced assurance package will provide significant payouts to Singaporeans over the next 5 years. Every adult Singaporean will receive cash payouts totaling $700 to $1,600. Eligible seniors will receive a special GSTV cash seniors bonus totaling $600 to $900. Eligible HDB households will receive additional USAVE rebates totaling $330 to $570 depending on flat type. All Singaporean children and seniors will receive MediSave top-ups totaling $450. All Singaporean households will receive 2 tranches of CDC vouchers worth $200 each in 2023 and 2024. The vouchers can be used at all participating heartland merchants and hawkers, as well as major supermarkets. Details are in the annex. For the majority of Singaporean households, the offsets from the assurance package will cover at least 5 years of additional GST expenses. And for lower income households, they will receive more, with offsets covering about 10 years worth of additional GST expenses. For example, take a middle income family of 4 in a 4-room flat with 2 school-going children and a household income of about $8,000 a month. They will receive a total of around $4,000 in benefit, around 5 times the additional GST they are expected to incur a year. If I were to choose a lower income family, the benefits they receive will be larger, and the offsets will then cover more years of additional GST expenses. Seniors will also get more benefits. Take the example of a retired couple in a 3-room flat. They will receive even more support from the assurance package at around $6,800. This far exceeds 10 times the additional GST they are expected to incur a year. Even with these offsets, some vulnerable households may require more support. These households with urgent needs can approach their citizens' consultative committees for assistance. And to further support vulnerable households, I will top up the CCC ComCare Fund by $5 million over 5 years. I will also provide a total of $12 million over 4 years to our self-help groups. In addition, businesses may need to adjust to the GST increase, so I will set aside close to $40 million under the Productivity Solutions Grant for businesses to apply for subsidized accounting and point-of-sale solutions. Over and above the transitional support provided by the assurance package, I will enhance the GST voucher scheme, which is a permanent feature of our system. The permanent GST voucher or GSTV scheme currently has 3 components: a cash payout, MediSave top-up, and utilities rebates. I will enhance it in 3 ways. First, the service and conservancy charges rebate will be made a permanent component of the GSTV scheme. Second, the assessable income threshold for GSTV cash will increase from $28,000 to $34,000. This will cover more Singaporeans. Third, I will increase the quantum of the GSTV cash payout to $500 for those residing in homes with annual values of $13,000 and below, and to $250 for those residing in homes with annual values of between $13,000 and $21,000. And the details will be provided in the annex. The enhanced permanent GSTV scheme will provide continuing offsets for the GST expenses of lower to middle income households and most retiree households beyond the transitional period covered by the assurance package. The enhanced GSTV will fully offset the total GST that retiree households living in 1 to 4 room HDB flats have to pay. Many retiree households in bigger flats will also have their GST offset by a significant amount. For low-income households who do not have elderly members, the GSTV will offset about half their total GST expenses every year. Both the assurance package and the enhanced permanent GSTV scheme will be implemented together before the GST rate increase so that Singaporeans can benefit from both schemes at the same time. Low-income households in particular will be well looked after. Besides the offsets in the assurance package, the permanent GSTV ensures that they will receive significant support on a continuing basis. This is why the GST increase will not hurt low-income households. For them, the impact of the increase in GST will be neutralized. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the budget is about using our collective resources to build our nation and to improve the lives of all Singaporeans. The budget supports spending on programs for all in areas like security, housing, education, health. Every dollar collected flows back to our taxpayers in one way or another. And the benefits show up in many ways: in our seniors' silver support payments, in our lower wage workers' workfare payouts, in the subsidies for our loved ones for healthcare, in the childcare subsidies that parents enjoy, in the quality education every child receives. We are reminded of them every day when we look around. Our roads, MRT lines, hospitals, schools, the beautiful parks we enjoy, in the safety and security our families enjoy. But when it comes to paying for these benefits, we should not shirk from our responsibilities. No one likes to talk about taxes, but there are no painless solutions. Ultimately, every need must be paid by someone. Every dollar not paid by one person will have to be made up by someone else, either today or in the future. But what we can and will always do is to ensure that we have a fair and progressive system in Singapore. And this means that those with more will contribute more taxes than the benefits they receive. Those with less will still contribute, but a lesser amount, and they will receive more benefits in return. This reflects our values and who we are as a society. This is how we strengthen our social compact, and this is how we will fund our common aspirations for tomorrow. Sir, let me now go through our fiscal outlook. At the onset of COVID-19 in FY 2020, we were looking to draw up to $52 billion from past reserves to protect lives and livelihoods. Given the uncertainty of the crisis at that time, we had to set aside sufficient resources to handle any downside scenarios. We now expect to utilize a lower amount of $31.9 billion from past reserves for COVID-19 relief in FY 2020. This is the result of our swift and decisive response, which allowed us to avert worse public health outcomes. We saw a stronger than expected rebound in our economy and businesses and did not need to utilize measures like loan loss provisions, which we had set aside. For FY 2021, we had planned to draw up to $11 billion from past reserves for the COVID-19 resilience package. We now expect to draw a lower amount of $5 billion from past reserves. This is mainly due to a reduced expenditure of $10 billion for the COVID-19 resilience package, underutilization of ministries' expenditures, primarily due to projects delayed by COVID-19, as well as one-off revenue upsides, including from vehicle quota premiums and stamp duties. We also tapped on our existing resources first to provide short-term relief when we had to tighten restrictions periodically last year. For example, the $2 billion worth of economic relief measures introduced during the heightened alerts last year was resourced through a reallocation of funds. And during the stabilization phase, we introduced $1.4 billion worth of support measures. For timely implementation of these measures, we took an advance from the contingencies fund. I will now replace the advances through the supplementary budget for FY 2021. For FY 2022, we will set aside $6 billion to maintain a multi-layered public health defense. This is necessary for us to respond nimbly and confidently to the evolving COVID-19 situation. Given the extraordinary nature of this pandemic, we will resource this COVID-19 public health expenditure for FY 2022 from past reserves. The President has given her in principle support for this. This brings the total expected draw on past reserves over FY 2020 to FY 2022 to up to $42.9 billion. This cumulative draw is less than the initial draw of $52 billion that the President had originally agreed to for FY 2020. It reflects our prudence in the use of past reserves. Beyond the crisis, our spending needs will continue to grow as we tackle structural shifts and invest more to deliver on our longer-term priorities, as I had laid out just now. In order to meet new spending needs, besides raising revenue, we will continue to manage our expenditure growth. Since FY 2017, we have implemented a 2% cut in the budgets of all ministries and organs of state to ensure we spend judiciously and achieve good value for money outcomes. From FY 2023, I will apply a further 1% cut to the budgets of ministries and organs of state. Funds from this adjustment will be channeled towards new priorities. Let me now summarize our overall fiscal position. For FY 2021, I expect an overall deficit of $5 billion or 0.9% of GDP. For financial year 2022, our budget remains expansionary to support the economy. I expect an overall deficit of $3 billion or 0.5% of GDP. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Singapore has come a long way in our transformation. Life has not been perfect. We have stumbled and struggled here and there, but all things told, we can be very proud of where we are today. Remember, we were once thought to be an improbable nation. We are a little red dot, a most unlikely country. We are the only city in the world with a military and foreign service. We are a diverse city in one of the most highly diverse regions in the world. We are the only city of this size that is also a country and a hub for the world. Throughout our nation's history, we have faced many crises. Our pioneers still remember what it was like during the Japanese occupation. World War II seems very distant to us, but for the survivors, the experiences left them with indelible lessons. There is an exhibition now at the National Museum marking the 80th anniversary of the fall of Singapore, with stories of those who lived through it. One of them is Madam Sim Soo Wee. She was just 7 years old when she lost her parents during the occupation. She still remembers vividly the hardships of war and how she and the people around her persevered through the most difficult days. And she said, I hope the younger generation will continue to stay united and demonstrate the same fortitude and resilience in the face of their own test. Indeed, over the subsequent decades, we have confronted many other challenges. We had the communist insurgency in the 50s. We went through the tumultuous period of the 60s and early 70s with racial riots, separation from Malaysia, and the sudden departure of the British. Since then, we've had to deal with one crisis after another: economic recessions, 9/11 and terrorism, SARS, and the global financial crisis. Through these crucibles of fire, we forged our Singapore spirit, a spirit that is resolute and indomitable, that never gives up and never says die. Adversity has not weakened us. Instead, it has strengthened our steel, deepened our bonds, and brought us closer together as one united people. And so it has been in the last 2 years of the pandemic. We have made many sacrifices, stood together, and measured up as one people. I will never forget the contributions of our frontline warriors, how they displayed tremendous courage, valiantly took on personal risk to fight the virus, and went above and beyond the call of duty. I will always remember how different groups from the public and private sectors joined forces to set up the community care facilities at the Expo in 2020, when we were overwhelmed with our first wave of infection. They worked hand in hand and against all odds got the facility up and running in a matter of days. And since then, we have launched many more Singapore Together projects involving public-private partnerships and alliances for action. They remind us that we are stronger when we stand together. I was especially cheered by the responses of our youth throughout this pandemic. They have taken the restrictions in their stride and found new ways to learn online and to keep in touch with their friends. In these difficult times, many look beyond their own circumstances to help others in need. And I saw this same resilient spirit at the AFF Suzuki Cup semi-final football match last year. The Lions fought hard and gave it their all. Even though they lost the game in extra time, many fans stayed on after the match and applauded the team, proud of how they had persevered despite going down to 8 men. At the end, the fans in the stadium stood at attention and everyone started singing the national anthem in unison spontaneously. It was an unforgettable moment. I'm sure all of us will have our own memories of how the Singapore spirit shone brilliantly in the darkest hours of the pandemic. Let us draw strength from these experiences and continue to keep faith with one another. Sir, the past was not foreordained, neither is the future predestined. There will be unexpected problems ahead, as there were in the past. They have to be met, grappled with, and resolved. But looking back at what we have been through during these COVID-19 years, we have nothing to fear. We will always overcome. We will always prevail so long as we continue to stand side by side in solidarity with one another, regardless of race, language, or religion. We will chart a new way forward together. We will see through the pandemic today and build a better Singapore tomorrow. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I beg to move. Thank you.
Listening to Prime Time on Money FM 89.3. That was Finance Minister Lawrence Wong delivering the budget speech live in Parliament. I'm Rachel Kelly with finance presenter JP Ong. We're joined in the studio by Alvin Liew, senior economist from UOB, and Chiu Hong, partner head of enterprise tax at KPMG Singapore. We're going to check in quickly on the markets. We'll be back in with you in a minute to do a wrap of the key points from this year's budget speech.
Traffic. If you see anything on the roads that we might have missed, you can share it with us via SMS or WhatsApp at 8855-0893. But
Traffic was a bit fast for me there. Taking a look at what's happening out on the roads for you. We've got a vehicle that's broken down on the PIE towards Tuas after Adam Road exit. Heavy traffic on the PIE towards the airport as well, the Jurong Town Hall exit. And a vehicle's broken down on the AYE towards the MCE at Keppel Road exit.
please send the message through only when you are safely parked. Money FM 89.3. Financial updates from the Business Times.
Good afternoon. This is JP Ong from Money FM 89.3, and we will be providing you a recap for how Singapore's markets closed out the last trading day of the week. Yes, as the budget was unfolding, the markets kept rolling. Unfortunately, we saw the Straits Times Index roll down. Not by much, though. The STI did close in the red, but just falling by about 12.5 points, or down 0.4% to 3,428 points. A losing effort for the STI, although they did close marginally higher over this week. Value turnover was fairly impressive, about 1.2 billion Singapore dollars in total trades changing hands. And across the broader main board and catalyst, we saw a total of 259 stocks, REITs, and trusts actually close in the green, and more than the 226 loser today. So on the margin, the second and third lighters doing a little bit better than the blue chips so far today. A quick survey of the Straits Times Index shows that one of the reasons why the STI was actually hobbled today was because the banks all closed in the red, perhaps a sign of some more profit taking hitting some of the banks, especially after the likes of UOB, for instance, hit an all-time high in late last week. UOB today was today's most heavily traded offer, about 128 million Singapore dollars in total value turnover, but UOB today fell by about 0.9%, the country's third largest lender, down to $32.57. You can say that DBS was the best of the big three today, but they did also close in the red, only not as much as the other peers, of sliding 8 cents lower to $36.45. OCBC, though, saw the biggest intraday decline of the Singapore's major lenders. OCBC, the country's second largest bank, falling more than 1% to $13.27 per share. It was a better day, though, for the likes of Genting Singapore. And Genting Singapore actually closed marginally higher, up by about half a cent today to just about Genting Singapore there up to 79 cents per share. Genting Singapore, of course, did just report their recent earnings, but they did say that their net profit for the second half fell by about 49% year on year because of lower visitorship as COVID-19 community cases in the latter half of 2021 actually rose. Net profit also fell to about 95.1 million Singapore dollars during that period. That was down more than 50% year on year, and revenues also declining by about 17%. The operator of Resorts World Sentosa said it has experienced a decrease in visitorship, largely due to an increase or a jump in COVID-19 community cases, specifically from the Omicron variant. This was reflected by gaming revenue falling 16% year on year during the second half to about 359.7 million Singapore dollars. However, we want to take a look at some notable gainers today, and Thai Beverage continues to go from strength to strength. The Thai consumer giant today saw shares surge 2.9% to 71 cents apiece, and the REIT space also looked quite encouraged so far. We did see REITs close marginally in the green today. Capitaland Integrated Commercial Trust up by about 0.5% today to $2.14 per unit. We also saw some of the logistics and industrial REITs doing quite better than they did yesterday. The likes of Ascendus REIT, for instance, closing 0.4% higher at $2.83. Keppel REIT also up by about 0.9% to $1.15 a piece. We are also seeing, though, that not everybody made it out on the green side. Keppel DC REIT today fell by about 0.5% to $2.16. For Money FM 89.3, I'm JP Ong.
Those were your financial updates from the Business Times. Your voice, your thoughts, your needs. Money FM Budget Conversations 2022. Presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG and Reach.
You're listening to Prime Time on Money FM 89.3 with our budget special. We've had live commentary for you all the way throughout the budget announcement by Finance Minister Lawrence Wong. Now we're joined in the studio by our guests who've been with us very patiently for the last few hours, analysing and digesting the speech as it was broadcast live. We're joined by Alvin Liew, Senior Economist at UOB, and Chiu Hong, Partner Head of Enterprise Tax at KPMG. Singapore. Gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us throughout the duration of the speech and the show.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
And in the last portion of the announcement, we did see what many of us were looking out for, and that was details on the GST hike. We also saw the wealth tax. We saw some details there when it comes to property as well as vehicles.
Adjustments to personal income tax as well.
Quite a bit to digest on the tax front, a bit of a tax budget. We had carbon tax as well. So on first glance, taking a look broadly at the speech today, what are your thoughts? What's your impression, Alvin? Is it what you were anticipating?
First off, I have to congratulate my friend here who told me that if it comes after 5 this time timing on a Friday, right, there's going to be something big in there. And surely it comes as big as it comes, I guess. If I looked at it, one of the earlier signs that we just talked about earlier about the 4 points that he highlighted about investing in new capabilities, advance the green transition, renew and strengthen social compact, and the last one, a fairer and more resilient revenue structure, which is what let the anticipation of how the tax would change, and I think the fourth one really delivered much more in terms of surprises than the rest. But if I were to take a step back again, I think now in part of that speech itself, one of the key words now is social compact.
Mm.
And those on the renewal and strengthening of the social compact, and you can see a lot of those measures in the enhancement of the area. But of course, I think subsequent to when the tax measures started to roll out, everything I think fades into the background, so to say. Yes, but to be fair, that really fits to the fairer and more resilient revenue structure. The headline that he had put in as one of the 4 key thrusts of this his budget announcement. I would say that the GST itself, we were surprised that it came in. They were to do it stagger, and they delayed it.
Because at the start of the show, when we were talking, you were expecting it in one
go,
swoop.
and perhaps we were thinking of it earlier in July, which is why I think at the end of it, when we look at the fiscal outlook for FY 2022, right, the now expectations is still an expansionary outlook whereby there's a slight deficit. Well, because we had initially put in expectations of GST coming in the middle of the year, right? We are looking for a rather balanced or slight surplus, just a shade below 0.1% of GDP. So I think that's where that difference came from, at least from the way that we had estimated the upcoming budget. But I think the measures itself is truly a lot to digest, and I think Wu Hong would be the right person to send us through some of these tax changes. Yes, with his tax expertise.
Okay, maybe I just give my perspective towards this is probably the save the best for last kind of thing, right? And if you look at it, this budget actually is to rebuild the revenue, and it means it's really focusing on taxation to do that, right? So we have wealth taxes, we have GST, we have tax on luxury car, right? If you look at personal tax, this actually come as a surprise to myself too, right? I mean, our personal tax rate is 20 high. Before this hike is 22%, now to 23 and 24%, right? So again, if you look at personal tax, only 30% of the revenue come from personal tax. So if you can draw some extra revenue from personal tax, is not a bad thing. And the government said through this you will have $170 million more, right? So you managed to squeeze out some revenue out of this personal tax. Then does this make Singapore less attractive for high income earner to come over here? Bear in mind, there are also expatriates staying here who pay high tax rate. Will this deter them from coming? Probably my comments is that it will not be, because if you compare to the home country they come from, European country, the personal tax is much higher, right? In the region, I think our personal tax rate is not that high either. So this is a very safe way to collect more taxes in my view, right? Okay, then if you look at the wealth tax, as I predicted, the wealth tax will come in the form of treating the existing tax system, right? So in this way, the easy way to collect it is through transaction way. So property tax is transaction. So the collecting of property tax is so easy, so fast, and you can't really come out with fanciful structure to tax plan around it. So I'm not surprised to see the property tax rate will increase, and the government also make a distinction between owner occupied and non-owner occupied. That also don't penalize people, Singaporean or residents who really buy the house and stay in the house. Those who buy the house and don't stay in the house will pay huge property tax, which is only right to do so, because you will deprive the people who want to buy a house and stay. So that in a way is quite equitable, right? And then as I said, if you can afford that big bungalow or the GCB, I think probably you can pay a little bit more, right? For that enjoyment or for that the lifestyle. Then in terms of GST, I agree with Alvin here, is that we were also quite surprised that the government implemented on a stage basis, and rather than one go, probably on balance of many consideration, inflation, and the amount of the people affected by COVID, a stage implementation is more prudent, although that also means more inconvenience for businesses to do the tax increase in terms of your ERP system and accounting system 2 times. But I think it's all right. Yeah. So but I think more importantly is that the government also mentioned that the assurance package originally put aside at 6 billion has now been enhanced. So more help are given to households who are affected by this GST increase in rates, which is a right thing to do, and very thoughtful and listening to the low income families. Then in terms of the luxury cars, right? so the ARFs have increased. Again, the government is targeting as really super high-end, expensive cars. Again, if you can afford to drive those cars, I got nothing against all those the people who afford a car. Then you have to pay more to do that. Yeah.
So would you call these Robin Hood taxes then? I mean, it's interesting though. So taking a look at 6 things you need to know about the taxes, just to recap. 2-step GST hike is to take place in 2023 and 2024. We've got higher personal income taxes for top earners as well. We've got increased tax rates for residential properties. Luxury cars are to be taxed at a higher rate. We've also got carbon tax rate raised to $50 to $80 per ton by 2030. Exploring a top-up tax for MNCs as well. I think I've covered most of them there. Is there anything that I've missed there, JP?
I think you've pretty much covered the gamut there of the tax. I mean, they did say that the taxes overall were going to increase in order to replenish the coffers, but perhaps not in the combination we thought, did we, gentlemen?
Yes, no, definitely not in this very broad range of measures. But to bring us back a bit onto the corporate tax, I think this is probably something to watch out for in the developments. And Minister Wong has rightly pointed out that this is still, I think they are is under study, where they differentiated between the pillar 1 and 2, and there would be some implications on tax implications on either those, and this still needs some stage. But I would envisage that in the next budget or the one after, right, there might be changes to the corporate structure, tax structure. I think again overall, I would say that it fits that the 4 arrows, if you may. I wouldn't call. I'm not quite sure that we can call Minister Wong Robin Hood, but certainly he did cover a lot of ground. Whereby I think the lower income and most vulnerable has been it's been adequately taken care of. The GST has been deferred from this year to staggered in 2 phases in over next 2 years, which also a consideration for who will be most impacted by the GST, which also brings us the fact that a lot of the measures that covers adequately covers them for all the financial impact, and the lower the income group you go, and the more the subsidies are given to them, which is the right direction. But one thing is just strikes me again is that of course the property tax itself, that's when I look at the ranges, has been quite a substantial increase. I will believe that the higher ranges, right, would definitely be applying to the more higher value. Definitely it will be structured that way. But again, I'm quite surprised by the magnitude of the increase.
Do you think it was too simple, perhaps, just differentiating the property tax increases between owner and non-owner occupied? And maybe they should have done it by property value, perhaps?
From my personal point of view, in terms of housing, right, it's like it's definitely one of your investment options. But housing, again, from my economic standpoint, right, is a bit of like a dead kind of investments, it's a unit where you stay. There is a use for it, but if you build thousands and thousands of luxury units, right? To me, it's doesn't add much in terms of value to the country itself. While if you are investing into a company, for example, right, that deals with mRNA technology that will give you the edge in terms of new medicines, new whatever, and that would actually push your, if I would put it like the economic frontier, of the country itself, and that is what I would say that is constructive kind of investment. So that's how I see it. So in that sense, if you're owner occupied, if you are staying there, right, then you are making use of the place. But if it is on an investment basis and there's too much of it, right, this the money could be more well spent, in my view, diverting your investment into some things that will actually add value overall to not just to yourself, but also to the broader economy.
Yeah, what strikes me too here is that when you say, you look at the impact, right, it's definitely a bigger brunt of it is by non-owner occupied versus owner occupied. I believe anything excess of 30,000 value will go from 4 to 16% to 6 to 32%, right, depending on where it is. And it's bigger for non-owner occupied. So I'm wondering, it's on the surface, it strikes me that it's really going to hit landlords, for instance, and people who rent things out, which means, well, what I do wonder, and perhaps it's good to have somebody on from the property front, perhaps to talk to in the next few days, what this will actually do to the rental market, for instance, here in Singapore moving forward. I think that's something I'd like to ask because I am a renter as well, right?
And overall property prices after the cooling measures that we saw introduced in December.
Yeah, I mean, this does not come as a surprise. I mean, despite all the cooling measures, you can see our housing prices have been going up. HDB prices have been exceeding $1 million per unit. And so, and then private properties are also increasing a lot. So the distinction here they make between owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied. If the non-owner occupied, the increase apply to all annual value, whereas the owner-occupied only apply to annual value exceed 30K. So they do make a distinction on the value of the property for owner-occupied, which is fair and equitable, because sometimes owner-occupied property can be a small property, maybe passed on by your family, and you may not be wealthy, but you just have inherited that, so you may not be fair for you to pay so much property tax. So you want a big houses, then and owner-occupied, then you have to pay for it.
I just wanted to go back to the corporate tax, the base erosion and profit shifting initiative. Now, Finance Minister Lawrence Wong said, this is going to be studied. They're exploring a top-up tax called the minimum effective tax rate, which will top up the M&E group's effective tax rate to 15%. And he said this is going to be studied further by the Inland Revenue Authority of Singapore, which will consult the industry on the design of this top-up tax. What can businesses do now, though, to start preparing for that?
Well, I think the first and foremost, businesses must really understand what are these rules that OECD is discussing. It's quite complicated, in fact, right? And then start to plan what can they do to minimize the additional tax they're going to pay. You see, the top-up tax that Singapore government is going to collect, right, and not allowing the host country to collect it, right? But the question is, this top-up tax collected, will it be then plowed back to the company that pay this top-up tax, or some of it may be plowed back to the Singapore infrastructure to rebuild the sector and bring the sector to a higher level. So these are the things that probably the Singapore government can consider and design it, because if an MNC is going to pay more taxes in Singapore versus in the past, they may be enjoying tax incentive, then they say, then should I continue to stay here? Maybe, or should I pull out some of my operation? We do not know the impact yet. So it really depends on how this top-up tax collected are being channeled to use. Is it partly to fund, maybe one way is to fund this MNC to subsidize them in terms of training their staff and then to help them to grow and scale up in Singapore, or maybe it really depends. So the design of it is going to be very, very important.
And the other thing too is that a part of that framework too will see taxable profits and multinational shifting from where activities are conducted to where consumers are located. And it's interesting too, is a lot of the MNCs will choose a strategy where they headquarter themselves with domicile in Singapore to oversee regional operations, usually across Southeast Asia. And what this actually means, could this actually mean that you'll see taxations come down because now they'll be taxed where revenues are and customers are located instead of rather in Singapore, and thus result in even more. What happens there?
Because this is under Pillar 1, because they depend on the market size, because Singapore market size is small. But by pure size, you will not be able to collect so much taxes. So there's an inherent disadvantage that Singapore have. But we'll see how much revenue we'll lose from there.
Let's take a look now at the fiscal position. But before we get there, just to highlight as well that healthcare spending is going to form the bulk of government expenditure by 2030 rather. And I think that's expected given Singapore's aging population, a large bulk of that going to infrastructure as well. But let's take a look at the fiscal position. 3 billion deficit expected in FY 2022 as the budget remains expansionary. Was that in line with your expectations as well, Alvin?
Okay, when we were looking at this, just now I was saying, right, we were expecting GST to come in the middle of the year. So there were additional funds, and that was, and we were looking at, I think it was looking at the really break even. The increase was barely noticeable in terms of percentage. It's less than 0.1%. But of course, right, if you look at how the things are now structured, the FY 2021 itself is 0.9. I think when they first looked at the estimate was minus 2.2, right? Last year, 2.2%. So if you're looking at a minus 0.5, right? By the time we come to, if you invite us again next year here, right? We might see a revision, quite a different number. It might turn out to be a small surplus. And I think, as we mentioned, we talked about the government has been fairly conservative in its position. And so some of the, I think if this year turns out to be in some of the revenues turn out to be stronger, and this minus 0.5 could easily turn to a slight positive still.
What are your thoughts, Wu Hong?
Yeah, I echo what Alvin say.
On that front, just to wrap up, is there anything that you think that the budget has missed this year, or anything else you'd like to see, you would have possibly have liked to have seen from this year's budget? I know
they missed you.
I was just going to say, before we got started, we were talking about the fertility rate here in Singapore as well, and incentives and initiatives to boost that. Is that one of the factors that you think, perhaps?
I think broadly, if you look at some of the other measures that were announced, there are quite a lot given towards education, things like that, and that will help in that sense that, I mean, all children will go through the education process, and those help will be definitely appreciated. But if you talk about like direct measures, right, yes, I think that was something that I thought that was missing.
Well, I would say that it's a very comprehensive, well thought through budget. And we don't really look at budget on a yearly basis. You should look at what are the previous budget that stack up to this year budget. So it's a roadmap that all the budgets are interlinked and connected. So by and large, I think a lot of things have been given to address the immediate needs, and also without losing sight of what the futures lie ahead, the challenges Singapore have. At the same time, we need to collect the money, the revenue to really chart ourselves, prepare ourselves better. Probably if you are the multinational companies, you think that there's nothing for me. It's all about local enterprises, help given to the local companies. And probably they may feel that this budget is really for Singaporeans and help us to have a more cohesive society.
The last two budgets were very much focused on the here and now, and the here and now then was very bleak, right, because of the COVID-19 uncertainties. Do you think this budget, which really wanted to set themselves back on the road, forward facing, do you think it's done enough to actually go back to budgets of old, which was always looking for 5 years down the road? Or
definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Anything else you'd like to add, Alvin?
Well, somebody did comment that I hear that. I guess when you hear him speak, especially when he ends off the speech, I mean, he does give you a fairly good impression. One good enough to be the country's leader. Food for thought.
Wu Hong, anything else from the budget?
Yeah, I think as I said before, this budget is I won't say come with no surprise. There is some element of surprise towards the end on when all the taxes are being announced. But on balance, I think this budget is necessary. And the way it been designed and being rolled out, I think most Singaporeans should be pleased with that.
Thank you. And I think discussions on leadership are discussions for another day, because that is all we've got time for today. But thank you both for joining us in the
you for having
studio
us.
today. It's been an absolute pleasure
Thank you
to
so
have
much.
you over the last few hours, and for your live commentary and analysis as well. Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Alvin Liew, Senior Economist at UOB, and Chiu Hong, Partner Head of Enterprise Tax at KPMG. I'm Rachel Kelly.
And I'm JP Ong.
This is Prime Time on Money FM 89.3.
Thank you
Thank you.
once again.